Chapter 41. The Fallen Dragon. Before setting sail, the wind was in the right direction on the sea, so the rowing Dornishmen were able to relax and rest. Some of them hunched over the planks and fell asleep, while others chatted around the burning fire, and pointed at the woman trapped at the mast. However, when the sea breeze around them became stronger and stronger, they had no time to think about anything else. The violent wind made the ship move forward at a fast speed, but the waves below were surging and bumpy at this time, making the ship extremely unstable. Seeing this, the 6 Dornishmen who were on night watch hurriedly began to gather the sails and kicked their sleeping companions awake one by one, but this did not bring any lucky results to this small flat-bottomed fishing boat. The fierce sea breeze soon blew out the fire on the boat, and the surroundings fell into a gloomy darkness. There were dark clouds above their heads, and bursts of lightning flashed from time to time, and dense raindrops began to fall quickly. Faced with this situation, the people of Dorne shouted in panic. Some held the wooden oars tightly and shook them vigorously to resist the turbulence of the waves, and some ran quickly on the boat to keep the boat balanced. The black-haired man in the lead shouted and commanded, while the thin old priest beside him knelt at the bow, clenched his hands and prayed silently towards the east of the ocean. Unfortunately, neither the sailors' oars nor the priest's prayers could stop the ship from becoming more and more unstable. The old priest, who prayed for a long time without any effect, looked at the stern in panic, hoping that someone could be as reliable as he claimed, but he saw that the other person was no longer there. The little queen who was tied tightly to the mast laughed unconsciously, and was slapped hard by the leading man. The next moment, a huge wave suddenly rose on the left side of the ship, directly swallowing up the large fishing boat. The arrival of the waves was like the collapse of the sky above. The ships in the hazy environment screamed and were instantly overturned. Soon they broke into pieces again. More than 20 Dornishmen fell into the sea. They relied on their water skills to flee hurriedly under the dark sea surface, but were forced to separate under the turbulent currents. Their faces disappeared in horror in all directions of the deep sea. The little queen, who was still tightly tied up, stood upside down in the ocean, her purple eyes widened, her cheeks bulged, and her hands tied to the wooden pole struggled hard, but the oxygen in her lungs became scarcer, and she never broke free. Just when she was about to open her mouth, a figure approached from the right side of her body. The familiar face made her feel surprised and angry, but it seemed to make her a little out of breath, so her already shaky mouth could not hold on at all, and the sea water rushed in, and everything in front of her seemed to be in chaos. It was not until she felt the ubiquitous sea water disappear that Rhaenys finally regained some consciousness. After vomiting a lot of sea water in the storm at night, she raised her hand and slapped the man beside her whose face she could not see clearly. Then her eyes went black and she fell into a coma completely. When she woke up again, it was the next day when the sea was calm. She opened her eyes and stared blankly at the clear sky above, feeling the hard and wet wooden board under her. Rhaenys's eyes were dull for a while, and finally her eyes focused, and she turned her head to look at the black-haired man beside her who was looking down at her. "Once again, I thought you were really going to betray me," she murmured. "Last time by the river, you suddenly threw me into the river, and I thought you wanted to go back on your word. This time you pretended to be like that, and I almost believed you. Is there anyone in the world who is more like a liar than you? If I hadn't lied to you, we would have been hacked to death long ago." Renly replied, his brown eyes swept over the target in front of him, and he nodded with satisfaction. The other party's face was pale, and one side of his face was a little swollen and bruised, but he seemed to be in good spirits overall. "Can't you just say hello to me?" The hoarse voice sounded very dissatisfied. "Why should I fight you?" He was interrupted by the person below him who raised his hand and grabbed the front of his clothes before he finished speaking. His upper body was pulled down by a huge force, and his mouth was blocked immediately. The unfinished words turned into a whimper. Looking at the woman with beautiful purple eyes close to him with white eyes, Renly was confused for a moment, and only one thought kept lingering in his mind. How could she be so strong? His lips felt cold, but after a while, he suddenly felt a sharp pain, and then the force that bound his body loosened. When he turned around, an angry word came from under him. "This taste is not good, right? But this is how I feel now." Renly touched his bleeding lips and stared at the other person with doubtful eyes. You want to retaliate like this? Next time this happens, be sure to tell me in advance." The other party did not respond directly, and seemed to feel that he was a little angry, so he stood up and glared at Renly, then turned around to look at the surrounding environment. Then she was a little dumbfounded. Under her was a heavy wooden board, which looked like a part of the previous ship. It was not large in size and floated on the sea like a shelf of a broken table. The surrounding light was bright and sufficient, but no matter which direction you looked, all you could see was a vast expanse of sea water. What should we do next? She couldn't help but turn back to look at Renly, and her voice unconsciously became much weaker. I saved food and water. Renly was covering his injured mouth with his sleeve. He pointed behind him angrily, and Rennis saw a thick rope pulling some scattered pieces of wood behind the wreckage. Bucket and baggage. As long as we don't get unlucky enough to encounter another storm, we can hold on for another month. Renly said, suddenly frowning. He felt that something was very wrong about this matter. Why did he always encounter shipwrecks or storms when he was at sea? What about 1 month later? The other party asked hurriedly after hearing this. If we're lucky, we'll encounter ships. If not, I can try to dive for fish, but that won't last long because we have no water. Renly replied absently. You mean we might die of thirst at sea? If you want, you can also choose to plunge into the sea and drown. I think this may be better than dying of thirst. The little queen glared at him when she heard this, but then she suddenly thought of something and moved closer with curiosity. Her purple eyes stared at Renly as if she were looking at some rare animal. You were able to hold your breath for so long in the sea? How did you do it? This is the power given to me by the Great Mother River. Only a fool would believe what you, a liar, say. Tell me, what is going on? I do not want to say. Shall I exchange my secret with you? I'm not interested in. Well, I thought you were interested in dragons. The life of wandering on the sea is actually quite familiar to Renly. After all, he had been drifting once not long ago. However, the current situation is different from last time. The sunk wood plank underneath him was not an intact ship. During this period, he was always worried that the plank would suddenly sink into the water at some point. At the same time, sleeping was not stable. There were no guardrails, and a bump was enough to push the two of them into the sea. Renly was not afraid of this, but Rennis beside him did not have his ability. However, in the end, Renly, who was not afraid of water, could not sleep well every night because he was always afraid that when he woke up, he would find that the mission target next to him had already fallen into the sea and choked to death. The little queen was also frightened by this at first, but it didn't take long for her to find out that Renly was there, and she didn't seem to have to worry about it too much, so she slept deeply every time. Deep down in her heart, she had some feelings for Renly. The defensiveness also quietly dissipated a lot. This inevitably made Renly feel sour, and what made him even more envious was that the other person was less afraid of the cold than he was. The sea at night is much colder than during the day. Although it is not as sharp a contrast as the desert, it is enough to make a person shiver with cold. However, he was obviously wearing the leather armor and clothing of a Dornish rider that had been used as a disguise, but the other party didn't seem to feel the coldness at all. No one in our family is very afraid of the cold. Faced with Renly's puzzled gaze, the other party took the initiative to explain. Aren't you afraid of fire? That's just a rumor. Rennis shook her head and denied, we can endure high temperatures, but we are not afraid of fire. The flames will still hurt us, but they are weaker than ordinary people. These words made Renly frown. Thinking of a certain pea shooter in his memory, he couldn't help but ask more about it. Is there really no one who is not afraid of fire? If there is, it can only be the ancient dragon kings. They have mastered the long-lost Valyrian magic. Rennis nodded her chin in reply, and then added another sentence. It can't be said that it has been lost, but that it has failed. In fact, I know all those magic spells, but none of them have succeeded. When she said this, the little queen felt quite depressed and melancholy. Renly curiously asked for a spell, but she muttered a garbled-sounding syllable without much hesitation, and seemed not to cherish it at all. He tried to write it down, but found that he didn't know why he couldn't remember it, so Renly had no choice but to give up. As the sun rises and sets, as time goes by, the two people living on the isolated island often have no way to avoid each other, and there is nothing else to do except talk. So gradually, they seem to have become friends who talk about everything. Good friend. Renly learned many interesting stories about the little queen's childhood and some of her interactions with dragons, while the other party became increasingly suspicious of his true identity. During a conversation, she said something intentionally or unintentionally. I suspect that you are the faceless men from Bravos in disguise. Those people have always been interested in our family. Renly denied this, but Rennis just rolled her eyes at him and did not continue to ask. The atmosphere was calm at first, but as the food and water sources became less and less, the atmosphere on the boat became increasingly depressing and dull. At the same time, the calmness on the sea quietly dissipated. On a dark cloudy night, the surrounding sea wind gradually became stronger, and finally mixed with heavy rain bombarded the wreckage of the ship and the two people inside. Another storm suddenly comes. Chapter 42. The thunder roared like the angry roar of the gods in the clouds, the violent wind over the dark ocean, and the heavy rain, occasionally accompanied by bursts of pale lightning flashes, making the two drowned figures in the turbulent water extremely miserable. The broken planks of the boat that had originally been used to survive had been swept away by the waves. Most of the food and supplies they were carrying were also washed away. The remaining ones were held tightly in their arms by the two of them, but there was no trace of them. It doesn't bring any comfort. The water around them was bumping and swaying, and the sound of violent storms filled the whole world. Rennis, who was tightly tied with a rope beside her, was saying something to Renly, but he couldn't hear it at all. The other party then leaned over and shouted in his ear, "Are we going to die?" "Maybe he won't die." Renly shouted back to the beautiful woman with wet short hair sticking close to her face, but before he could finish his words, a huge wave hit, and the two of them were completely engulfed by the sea water. The storm on the sea did not stop, but intensified. The vast sea roared and swayed, and the violent turbulence under the sea was like strong air waves, washing away all the materials inside, turning it around, and eventually it was unknown where it was. Time continues to pass, and the turbulence of the sea water continues. It is not until the storm slowly stops, the dark clouds in the sky quietly dissipate, an array of sunlight breaks through the clouds and shines on the sea somewhere, and continues to spread, that the storm is over. Finally, when the clouds dispersed, the originally dark sea turned into an extremely blue color. It turns out that it has already dawned. In the sea, on the beach of an island covered with palm trees, two uninvited guests tied together by a rope were washed up by the waves. After lying motionless on the beach for a long time, one of the slender figures trembled and untied the rope, then struggled to stand up and walk toward the end of the beach with staggering steps, while the other one was still trembling and hugging his arms. He lay paralyzed there, wet all over, as if there were ice particles sticking to his face and exposed skin. Although the sun around him was bright, it could not dispel the coldness that filled his body at all. Even for a long time, this man did not move his body even once. Not long after, the figure that left earlier returned, and then sat down next to the trembling person. His voice was hoarse and desperate. "I'm afraid this is a deserted island. I haven't seen any trace of human life. It's better to be on a deserted island than to fall into the hands of the enemy," the black-haired man on the beach said tremblingly. After basking in the sun for a long time, he seemed to have regained some strength, so he stood up and sat down on the sand with his face up. On the bed, the teeth in his mouth could not stop chattering. "But we have no food or water at all," Rennis murmured. "Even if there are prey here to hunt, do we have to eat raw meat?" Without saying a word, Renly tremblingly handed the other party an untied brown and black leather bag. Rennis took it and opened it, and found a piece of flint and 2 silver daggers inside. She couldn't help but look up at him in surprise. "You expected that?" "If I had expected it earlier, how could I have ended up in such a place?" the pale Renly replied tremblingly. The continuous diving clearly exceeded the upper limit of his body's endurance, so much so that he felt that the coldness had penetrated into his bones. The coldness hit his forehead and refused to go away for a long time. Renly seriously doubted that if this was his real body, then after such a fuss, there would definitely be some serious disease. This made him vigilant and decided to take it easy outside of the dungeon and not be careless. Rennis didn't know what the other person was thinking at this time. Seeing his different expression, she couldn't help laughing to herself. "What, you regret it?" "That's right." Renly nodded with difficulty. "We should walk along the seaside, or think of some other way. Taking the sea route is definitely a bad choice." Rennis was stunned for a moment by these words, and then suddenly changed the subject. "Is this how you saved me in the first place?" "What? You know what I'm talking about. I don't have time to play riddles with you." After rubbing his hands, Renly stood up tremblingly and began to pace slowly on the beach. At this time, he had lost his boots. His bare feet felt very comfortable stepping on the soft sand. However, the breeze blowing from the nearby ocean always made him shiver, so he walked deep into the beach. "Really just for the dragon egg?" Staring at the other person's back, the little queen looked in a daze. "Dragon eggs are very precious, but they are not the same as dragons. Unless you have the blood of the Valyrian Dragon King, you will not be able to hatch a dragon even if you get the dragon eggs. And even if it could be hatched, it would be impossible to control a dragon without the corresponding bloodline. Although dragon eggs can be exchanged for a lot of wealth due to their rarity, if it is really for money, wouldn't it be better to just ask for them than to ask for them? While thinking, an idea suddenly flashed across her mind, and Rhaenys couldn't help but shout at the figure pacing back and forth at the end of her sight. "Did you know me before?" "That's right." The voice sounded very weak when it came from the distance. "I met you from books." "What's the meaning?" "It means someone wrote your story in a book, and then I saw it." Rhaenys frowned when she heard this, and a sudden anger suddenly emerged from the bottom of her heart, so she patted her butt and stood up, walking quickly towards the other party's location. "How many of your words are true?" "I forgot what I said," Renly answered at the end of the beach. He was walking back and forth to speed up the blood flow in his body to dispel the cold. "You said you were a Dornishman. Isn't that obvious? Then where is the territory of the Coggle family in Dorne? What is their emblem?" "In Sandstone City in Western Dorne, the emblem is a three-headed black scorpion on a red background. House of Weir. Along the Bone Road, the family castle is called Weir City, close to the border of Dorne." "What about House of Dane?" "Starfall, Western Dorne, on the edge of the coast of the Summer Sea," Renly said, looking at the man who walked in front of him, and couldn't help saying, "If you are bored, why don't you try the spells of your family, maybe one of them will work, and then solve the current problem." "How far is Starfall from Hellgate? Or how long does it take to walk? Who is the patriarch? You said you were from Starfall." Rhaenys ignored Renly's words, but stared and asked. This question made Renly blink. Most of the families in Westeros have a history of more than 1,000 years, so many of the knowledge he had learned are applicable at the moment, but learning does not mean that he has really come into contact with it. No matter how much knowledge he learned from books, he couldn't know how far apart something was, unless there was a corresponding record in the book. However, there was no record in reality, or even if there was, he had never learned it. So Renly frowned and said, "You have bad breath, haven't you brushed your teeth for a few days?" This made the serious Rhaenys's face flush instantly, and then she angrily grabbed the collar of Renly's linen clothes and pulled it in front of her. "Don't try to change the subject. Tell me, who are you?" It was this huge power again. Renly found that although the other party looked like a weak woman, she was very strong, so that he was even unable to break free when facing this face so close at hand. What does it matter? It's not important. He felt that the other party was too emotional, so he reminded her. "I promised to rescue you, and you promised to give me the dragon egg. It's a very simple thing." The little queen was stunned when she heard the words, and then suddenly let go of her hand, stepped back 2 steps, and looked at Renly quietly. "Do you really think I will give you a dragon egg? Or do you really think I will keep my promise? You swore." "I don't believe in any god, and the dragon kings of Valyria never believe in gods." Her tone seemed a little strange. "Even if I break my oath, who will punish me? You swore with your family's honor. Only my brother cares about the so-called honor." She said, "Can it be eaten as a meal? Or can it kill enemies for us?" "I saved you." Renly said, "You can't be ungrateful. There are many ways to repay, but it won't be a dragon egg. So you plan to default?" "Of course, I tell you officially that I don't plan to keep my promise at all." Rhaenys nodded frankly. "So what can you do to me?" Renly touched his chin, did not answer the question, but looked at the other party with strange eyes. "Why are you telling me this now? You could have kept it from me forever. Does it matter?" The little queen asked, glancing around, her voice bitter. "We've been drifting on the sea for so long, we don't even know where this place is. And even we don't know where this island is, who would know? Who can come to save us? If you can't fulfill your promise, I can't give you dragon eggs anymore." "That's not necessarily true." Renly shrugged, "Maybe a ship will pass by here in a few days. I don't think I'll be that lucky." Rhaenys sneered, "You know, except for the eyes, adult dragons have no weaknesses, but they just shot its eyes. This doesn't mean anything." "Then what about that weird old man? What about the storm?" "A storm may be accidental, and we encountered 2 in a row." Renly coughed unconsciously when he heard this. He suspected that the storm might have been caused by himself, although he was not sure why. But he couldn't tell the other party this, so he comforted him, "Don't worry, there will be a way." "What way?" the other party asked. "Not yet, but there will be one." Without saying anything, Rennis looked at Renly in silence until he frowned unconsciously, and then she suddenly spoke, "I told you that I would not give you the dragon egg, but you were not angry at all. But you keep claiming that you saved me just because of the dragon egg. Do you think this is normal? If you really don't give it to me, what can I do? So I look like a fool?" The sharp questioning made Renly raise his eyebrows, but after Queen Rennis took a deep breath, her voice calmed down. "I just checked, from here to the other side of the island, it's all dead, no prey or water source. It's all sea around, and there's no land at all. How long do you think we can survive in this situation? Are you scared? Aren't you scared?" Renny didn't answer, but turned his head to look deep into the island. It's no wonder that the other party was so emotional. Judging from the appearance alone, this island really is a deserted island with trees, sand, cold shallows, and endless sea. A circle of sand surrounds the outside of the island here, and there are some dense and straight palm trees growing inside. Looking through the gaps in the forest, there are no traces of any animals. I can try to catch fish. He turned back and said to the other party, "We have flint, daggers, and trees here. Don't worry about food. What about water?" "I'll go into the woods and take a closer look later," Renly replied, "maybe I'll find some plants that will quench my thirst." Rennis didn't speak, and looked at him quietly for a while, then suddenly lowered her head and murmured, "Why are you always so confident? Don't you feel despair at all? Falling from the sky, being captured, shipwreck, storm, island, we are already very unlucky, but you never complained. Even if we have food and water, what happens next? There is always hope for living." Renly replied. Seeing that the other person was silent and did not speak again, he patted his arm to express comfort, and then looked around. The island is surrounded by sea water on all sides, with a green edge and blue outer edges. Beyond that, there is no sign of land or other islands. Only the deep blue sea extends endlessly to the end of the sight. "I don't know where I am, as if the island has become the whole world." Renly frowned. The reason why he was not affected by the situation and developed emotions such as boredom or even despair was simply that he was not from here. And this also reminded him of those three things unconsciously. The first thing has been completed, and there is no need to worry about the second thing. Although it feels like time is passing a bit chaotically, by rough estimation, there should be only a few days left in the month. Only this last one. Thinking, Renly looked up at the sky. "We're here now, why can't we give up?" he murmured, thoughtfully. At this time, the sun is high above the head, and the cloudless sky reveals the clearness and brightness just after the violent storm. The sunshine falling from the sky is warm and pleasant, and the sea breeze blows on the face, bringing a salty smell and a lingering coolness. Chapter 43. The situation was not as bad as he had imagined. After dispelling the chill in his body, Renly officially began to explore the island. Then he found that although the island was not very big, the resources were quite rich. Palms, hibiscus, bananas, coconut trees, and even lemon trees, the vegetation on this small island is diverse, and he also found a small pond that looked dirty and covered under stones in the depths of the forest. The water in the pond was dirty and yellow, which might be rainwater accumulation or groundwater infiltration. Renly was not sure whether the water was drinkable at first, but after observing for a while, he found that many small animals such as squirrels came to drink water, and even birds. So he was relieved. In terms of food, there were indeed no common prey, but Renly found a red and green venomous snake on the island. This snake is the natural enemy of the rats on the island, but facing Renly who has the knowledge of making poisons, it can only be regarded as food. In addition, he also found a large crab that specializes in eating coconuts. It looks ferocious and scary, but it tastes very delicious after being roasted. There were also common crabs and sea snails emerging from the waves on the beach, and there were also some large and small shells dotted everywhere on the beach. The big shells could be used to collect rainwater, or as small pots for boiling water and stewing soup. After the initial stabilization, Renly even boiled a pot of lemon tea with lemon tree leaves and shells. In this way, food and water were not lacking for the time being. As for the residents, although he did not find a natural residence such as a cave here, he found raw materials on the spot and wove a thatched shed with palm and banana leaves. The ropes made of tough bark were quite strong, and the branches and beams placed horizontally on the forks of the two lemon trees were also tightly fixed at both ends. Even if the wind blew on the island, there was no swaying. Of course, all this was not so easy to do, but due to the special system in his body, as long as he did it once, the skills he showed next would become more and more proficient, so much so that the little Queen Rhaenys was dazzled by the sight. When Renly turned the thatched hut at the edge of the woods into a low triangular house, she finally couldn't help but ask. Have you learned these before? First use your brain, then your hands, and then you will be able to do it. Renly shrugged and answered. In fact, some vague memories and knowledge from the previous life should also be counted, but there is no need to tell this person in front of him. He also gained benefits in this process. Cooking, construction, and horse riding and swimming, which he had learned before, although the level is only the lowest level, but the number seems to be a kind of gain. It's just that Renly feels that other than riding and swimming, other skills are not very useful in the world outside the dungeon. After all, he can't be a cook, nor will he be a stonemason or a carpenter. But for now, because of his series of actions, the originally depressed little queen has gradually regained some of her former liveliness and cheerfulness. She laughs a lot more every day, and will follow Renly's butt to help him. Unlike at the beginning, she looked at the sea and sighed melancholy all day long, and seemed to have tacitly accepted everything in front of her. Her questions also changed a lot. At first, Renly responded patiently, but gradually he felt a group of flies buzzing around his ears. On the 7th night after being stranded on this island, a fire lit up the shed. Rhaenys, who was squatting beside it, covered her conch cup with both hands. The mist from the hot lemon tea covered her cheeks hazily, but it couldn't cover her curious purple eyes. How did you faceless ones change your faces? Is it magic? Or a special mask? Renly, who was sitting on a tree stump bench and stirring the fire in front of him, glanced at her when he heard her. I've said it before, I'm not a faceless one. Then how did you become a Dornishman? Are you so sure that I'm not a Dornishman? Of course, and you didn't deny my suspicion. The little queen said, so how did you become a Dornishman? Renly ignored her, but the other party didn't stop talking. Did you expect me to appear in Hellgate? Or did you go there for something else? How did you manage to breathe underwater? Are you married? Do you have children? Are you annoying me? If you could ask fewer questions. Renly sighed in response, maybe I would find you cute. After the words fell, there was no sound from the other side for a long time. Renly couldn't help but look up, but found that the man was already in tears. What's wrong with you? He was stunned. I have a foul mouth, I just said that, don't take it seriously. In fact, I think you are quite interesting. The other party shook his head, hugged his knees and stared at the fire for a long time, and suddenly murmured, I am the Queen of Westeros, I am a Targaryen, I have everything I want. I am also a mother, and my son in King's Landing is only 3 years old, can you understand? He is only 3 years old. I should have watched him grow up and become a great king. But now, I am trapped on this broken island, wearing the stinky clothes of the Dornish, smelling bad, and I don't know how long I can live. The only companion who can talk to me is mysterious and refuses to tell even the truth. Renly opened his mouth to say something, but she suddenly covered her face and cried, as if she could no longer bear it. Her voice was heartbreaking, and she didn't care about her dignity and image as a queen at all. Renly sighed at this, stood up and crouched down to get out of the leaf hut. The light of the bonfire flickered behind him, and a narrow shadow danced in front of Renly. He listened silently to the loud crying from behind. For the first time, he felt a little depression in his heart. The other party was not sad about the predicament in front of her, nor was it his lie. She just missed home. Thinking about it, he looked up at the deep and vast starry sky in the sky. The appearance without a single cloud made him doubt whether he had a wrong idea. But apart from that, he had no other thoughts. Am I really going to be trapped here? Muttering, Renly frowned. In addition to death and completing the task, he didn't know other ways to get out of the copy, but he felt vaguely that it was unlikely that he would stay here forever. But if we give up halfway? While thinking, he suddenly felt a special cool feeling coming from his brain, and at the same time, a message emerged. Successfully past 30 days, you have obtained a mysterious change. Your fishing knowledge has derived a characteristic homecoming bait. Chapter 44. All the sounds in the ocean seemed very faint, and the blocked ears felt slightly swollen under the sea water. The sunlight pierced the swaying sea surface above, like a faint light penetrating from another world. The faint light illuminated the dark world, and also radiated countless faint floating substances like dust in the sea water. A brown-black crab claw poked out from the sand beside him, bringing up a faint turbid sand and dust. Then this small crab that looked like a hermit crab circled in front of Renly horizontally and finally crawled into his trouser legs. At this time, Renly sat cross-legged at the bottom of an ocean reef, his eyes quietly staring at the deep and hazy sea world in front of him. His face, which was illuminated by the faint light, had no expression, and his hair was floating upwards, like a clump of black seaweed. Countless cold currents penetrated into his body from all directions, and the chill kept getting worse, but he could not feel any pain and suffocation caused by lack of oxygen. There was also a faint coolness invading his eyes, so the sour feeling brought by the sea water was constantly weakened. But Renly was already familiar with all this, so he did not pay much attention to the changes in his body, but stared at the hazy and unclear area in the deep sea in front of him. His face did not show any emotion, but he was expecting something in his heart. The change happened not long after. A silver-black eel suddenly broke through the hazy sea water and rushed towards Renly from the depths of darkness. But when it arrived in front of Renly, it changed its previous irritability and turned to slowly circling around him, occasionally approaching and touching his naked upper body with its cold mouth. Renly ignored this loach-like fish. He was still staring ahead, waiting for a target to appear. After a while, another brown and black striped eel sprang out again, and like the previous one, it began to swim around Renly. Then came more fish. Fat whiting covered with brown spots, flat silver-scaled pomfret, ugly barracuda, densely packed small herrings. The fish in the underwater world attacked him sporadically at first, but as time passed, more and more fish came in succession, and finally the darkness completely covered Renly's surroundings. It was not until then that he grabbed a fat salmon, then kicked the ground with his legs, and rushed upward with a cloud of turbid sand and dust. The surrounding fish were startled and scattered, and then gathered around the figure's legs like a black tornado, and until the other party left the sea, they reluctantly dispersed in all directions. Renly climbed up the rocks on the shore and exhaled a breath of cool air. Then he bent down to pick up the linen shirt on the reef and put it on. The hot clothes made him feel warm and comfortable, but then he frowned, lowered his head and shook off his trouser legs, so a small crab was thrown out by him. The big silver salmon in his hand was out of the sea and twisted its body uncomfortably, but it was not violent, and it seemed that he had no intention of resisting Renly. "I feel embarrassed to eat you when you are like this," he muttered, looked at the sea beside him, and then looked thoughtfully at the clouds gathering from all directions above his head, and then carried the obedient fish towards the forest at the end of the beach. The characteristics of the homing bait rewarded not long ago are very interesting. It can allow Renly to attract a large number of fish in the sea water, as if he himself has become a powerful bait. This made his diving and catching fish extremely easy, and he could even pick and choose, as if he was visiting a fish market. At this time, Renly was wearing a brown linen short-sleeved shirt and pants of the same color and material. His bare feet stepped on the pebbles in front of the beach, leaving a trail of wet footprints. The pants soaked in sea water seemed a little heavy and black, but soon became lighter due to the heat of the surrounding environment. Stepping into the palm forest full of fallen leaves, bursts of trivial noises came from all around: sneaky mice, silent lurking venomous snakes, buzzing beetles, and big crabs that looked hard and fat lying on the trees with their claws stretched out. The triangular shed made of leaves and branches was built at the edge of the forest, close to the water source. There were palm trees all around. Not far away, on a low rock, a washed red satin top and trousers and two brown-black leather jackets were drying. A black-backed herring gull was squatting on Renly's jacket, pecking at the soft material on the side of the leather lining with its beak. Seeing this, Renly hurried forward to chase it away, and the bird fled in panic, and a burst of laughter came from behind. Turning around, Rennis, who was wearing similar clothes, was squatting in the open space in front of the leaf shed to make a fire and boil water. Seeing Renly looking at her, she pretended to be displeased and said, "Why are you chasing it? I'm betting whether it will poop on your clothes." "Betting with yourself? Then you are really boring." Renly rolled his eyes, walked closer and handed the fish in his hand to the other party. "Strange, how come you can catch salmon every day? Are there schools of salmon around here?" she asked in confusion after taking it, but she didn't expect that as soon as it left Renly's hand, the fish, which had been obedient, began to struggle vigorously. Caught off guard, Rennis lost her grip and let it fall to the ground. She screamed and squatted down to hold the fish tightly. There was no sound, but there was a huge force in her slender hands, so the fish's eyes bulged and its struggle became very weak. All this made Renly's eyes twitch. But the other party stood up as if nothing happened, and threw the fish in his hand into the shell pot that had been boiled aside. He did not dislike the dust and leaves on the fish at all. This was their 19th day on the island. Ever since Rennis cried a while ago, she has become docile, or in other words, she has worked hard without complaining. She no longer mentions the past or exudes negative emotions. Except for sometimes sitting melancholy on the beach in a daze, she seems to have really cheered up. Not only has she started to take the initiative to share all kinds of tedious tasks, she is even thinking about making fish soup by herself. In the clearing of the forest, the bottom of the carefully selected large shell was scorched black by the flames. The boiling water in it kept overflowing with foam at the edge. As the fish stopped struggling, a special smell gradually spread out soon after. That obviously wouldn't taste good. Renly, who was sharpening a branch with a dagger, suddenly remembered that the other party didn't scale or process the fish at all, but just threw the fish in. But seeing this person squatting in front of the fire with a cheerful look, he didn't have the nerve to remind him. So it was obvious that I couldn't drink the fish soup this time. The hot-boiled fish was finally cut into 2 parts with a dagger. Looking at the half-fish body mixed with internal organs that was filled with steam rising from the big shell, Renly felt that his picky eating habits seemed to have recurred. Looking up to the opposite side of the fire, the woman sitting on the tree stump seemed quite satisfied with her masterpiece. She was now cutting off a piece of fish with a dagger and chewing it in her mouth. So he stopped thinking about it, sighed, turned the dagger in his hand and began to cut carefully. While he was just cutting, he suddenly felt a little quiet around him. He couldn't help but look up, only to find that the woman opposite had already put down the food. She was sitting there with her chin propped up on her hand, her purple eyes unblinking. "Stare at yourself. What's wrong with you?" Renly asked. Looking at him quietly, Rennis didn't answer for a long time, but when Renly was about to ignore it, she suddenly spoke, "You know, when I was a child, I thought about what would happen if I was not a Targaryen." Renly raised his eyebrows when he heard this, but the other party did not stop talking. "If I were from Westeros, then I might have been born into a lord's family. In this case, I would not be able to escape the fate of marriage. If I'm lucky, I will be married to someone of the same age. If I'm not lucky, I will be married to someone of the same age. I can only be a bad old man. And if I am from a small lord family, maybe my father will be too poor to afford a dowry, and then I will be sent to be a nun, or I will be lowered in status and marry some loyal knight. Nun is not bad, but it will definitely be boring. It would be very bad if I were a peasant girl. It is very likely that I would be married to a man with a foul mouth, a drunkard, or a loser. I might also be targeted by a certain lord and give birth to a bunch of illegitimate children. No matter what do I want to," she said, seeing that Renly's expression seemed strange. She couldn't help but glare at him. "What are you looking at? I will definitely be stared at if I am so beautiful. The lords of Westeros have always been very barbaric. They actually have such a bad right of first night. You know, the first time I heard about this was how does it feel? I don't know, but I can imagine." Renly shrugged. "This is actually not the worst thing," Rennis said. "There are slaves everywhere outside Westeros. You can be beaten or scolded. If you are killed, no one will make a decision for you. If you want to be beautiful, you will be born at a certain age. I would be sent to be trained as a slave girl and learn some messy things. If I were born there, I might as well die early. So you are very lucky." Renly agreed. "As a Targaryen, you are the only one who can enslave others. Who dares to enslave you?" "Yes, the Targaryen motto is blood and fire," she murmured, and suddenly sighed. "But if there were no dragons, whose blood would be shed? Whose would be burned? Where is home?" Renly, who was about to replace him and be promoted to the royal family, actually had a say in this, but he didn't say anything. The person in front of him was just expressing his feelings after losing the dragon. The atmosphere fell into silence for a while. Renly didn't speak. The other person's eyes staring at the fire were also in a daze. It wasn't until the flames became a little weaker that she looked at Renly again. "Am I beautiful?" she asked. Her silver blonde hair, which was originally cut short, has now grown to the level of her ears. Her face is delicate and neat, her purple eyes are flowing, and her emotions of joy and sorrow make her look a little weak, but also have a unique style. It was an obvious thing, so Renly nodded. The corner of the other party's mouth curled up when he saw this. So what's your impression of me? How do you feel? I don't feel like you are 35 years old at all. Renly's words made the other party narrow his eyes, but then he smiled. Instead, she looks like a 15-year-old girl. So she couldn't help but said, you know, I tested you at first and suspected that you didn't like women, but later I found that you were not unresponsive, you were just more polite and educated, nothing like those in Westeros. Bad man. So now it's another test. Renly felt that the other party was teasing him. You can think so. Rhaenys rested her chin on her hand and looked at the black-haired man opposite her intently, and said slowly, I'm actually ready. If we are trapped here all the time, then is there any other possibility? You are a good man, knowledgeable and polite. Although you always lie, I can feel that you really want to help me. Most importantly, I don't hate you. When she spoke, her eyes were inexplicable, like happy and sad, relieved, but also with a trace of imperceptible depression and decadence. After hearing the voice, Renly didn't say anything. After looking at the other party quietly for a few times, he suddenly put down the shell plate in his hand, stood up and walked out of the woods. I'll get another fish, this one is not edible at all. Seeing this, Rhaenys was stunned, and then hurriedly shouted, then come back early, I think the weather is not good. Renly waved his hand without looking back, looking up as he walked. The endless clouds in the sky outside the shade of the trees have become dark and gloomy, and the chill around us is getting worse. The wind is blowing, and it's very strong. Chapter 45. It was not quiet at all on the eve of the storm. There were dull roars of thunder overhead. The roar of the waves was still clearly audible through the forest. The leaves of the palm trees surrounding the triangular shed were constantly being blown chaotically by the wind, making violent sounds. The swishing sound. The two people who had been chatting leisurely during the day were busy strengthening the small shed. At the same time, they placed dense shells on the surface of the flat stone not far away. Although they had a water source, the water source was turbid. And every time we draw water, we can see a significant drop, but the recovery is not much the next day, so we will naturally not miss the opportunity to replenish new water sources. But when the storm actually came, they found that this preparation was useless. The dark clouds covered the originally clear sky in gloomy darkness, and the strong winds were accompanied by countless large raindrops falling obliquely. The sound of leaves and heavy rain hitting each other mixed with the sound of the forest being violently blown up, making it appear violent and confusing. A bigger rainstorm soon poured down. The huge impact from the sky mixed with the strong wind directly blew the neatly arranged shells everywhere. Even if there were some that were specially fixed, most of them disappeared soon after. In the dark forest, Rhaenys was not too worried about the emergence of this storm. After all, she was no longer at sea at this time. At the same time, she claimed that she had never been sick. She even ran out when the heavy rain just fell and wanted to have a drink. But it was a pity that she came back like a drowned rat after a while, with a gloomy face. Can you imagine what it feels like to be slapped in the face repeatedly by water? Renly was staring at the huts on both sides with vigilance at this time, a little worried about whether this sheltered shelter could withstand everything outside. He glanced at the other party after hearing this, but then he looked away. The other party's chattering did not stop. There has always been a legend in Valyria that the land of the sunset will give birth to a disaster that will destroy the whole world. Therefore, the ancient Dragon Kings only built an outpost on Dragonstone Island on the edge of Westeros, with no real intention to go there. Coming here to our house I didn't believe it at first, but now I do. As she said that, she suddenly discovered something. She couldn't help but be startled, then smiled slyly, and then deliberately wandered in front of Renly's eyes with small steps. In the end, she accidentally stepped on a small slippery puddle that seeped into the edge. And even fell directly onto his back, making his already drowned image even more embarrassing. Screams and laughter filled the triangular shed. It's a pity that after a while they were no longer in the mood to play like this anymore. Just as Renly feared, this small shed could not survive the storm for long. When a strong wind hit, the wooden frame that was firmly fixed on the ground and the tree branches on both sides could no longer support it and began to creak. He collapsed sideways, and the entire shed shriveled up and collapsed in an instant. So much so that the two of them had to hold up a few large banana leaves and run away in a hurry, and then withered together on the side of the nearby big stone in the heavy rain. Unfortunately, this stone could not completely block the wind and rain, and the two people leaning together became even more embarrassed when they were soaked. Violent noises continued to come from the surroundings, and the black sky above them also roared. The woods in all directions were deep and pitch black, and occasionally bursts of pale rainforest scenes appeared as lightning bloomed. There was a voice coming from beside me, but it was difficult to hear clearly because of the loud noise around me. But after a while, Renly felt the woman next to him shrink into his arms, and then bury her face in his clothes. The warm breath and the contact with the cold skin made Renly feel a little bit inside. Strange, but this emotion quickly disappeared without a trace under the constant cold. The heavy rain was pouring down, and the sound of rushing was buried in the boundless darkness. The strong wind was mostly blocked by the big rocks behind him, but it could not completely stop its harassment. The rocky surface on the back is higher than the surrounding land, and there is no water accumulation due to heavy rain, but the constant erosion from the top of the head is still unbearable. Being in the woods, I could vaguely hear the sound of distant waves crashing against the rocks. A small brown squirrel, soaked all over the body, had hit at some point and was now staring at Renly cautiously. His nose was up and down, and when Renly saw it, he picked it up and put it in his hands. Moisture was everywhere, and the cold continued to seep into the depths of his body. The continuous coldness made him feel a little dazed for some reason, and he even fell asleep in the end, leaving all the chaos around him outside the darkness. When he woke up again, the surroundings had become peaceful. The sun was high above my head, and the warm sunshine kept driving away the coldness in my body. The leaves and branches of the trees beside me were dripping with water. The ground I rested on was still damp, but the big stone behind me had become much drier. The sea breeze blew the leaves slowly, and the sound of distant waves hitting the rocks was also clearly audible. The person in his arms had left without knowing when, and the little squirrel in his hand also disappeared. Standing up, his bones crackled as he stretched his body. Renly glanced around and heard a faint movement. So he walked toward the woods on the left, and soon he saw Rhaenys, who was picking banana leaves with her head raised. "Come on, we have to start over." The other party obviously heard the noise, so he shouted without looking back, "I won't get sick, but you won't. You have to be happy about this, otherwise we will have two troubles. Hope you really don't get sick." Renly thought to himself, but walked forward without refusing, and then collected the necessary raw materials to rebuild the shed. It's just that he doesn't have many extravagant hopes for this. "I have a hunch that this will be in vain." After picking off a banana leaf, Renly said to Rhaenys beside him. "Why?" The other party turned to look at him strangely. "Of course it's a storm," Renly replied. "I think this is the season for heavy rains. Look at how many times we've had them." These words made Rhaenys nodded in agreement, but then she said, "Then you can't do nothing. You are willing to sleep on a stone, but I am not." Renly smiled when he heard this, and then changed the subject. "I'll go to the beach and have a look. Maybe something will wash up on the shore. Come back soon." Rhaenys nodded, suddenly leaned over and kissed Renly's left cheek, then smiled at him, turned around and continued working. Renly was a little stunned by this. He touched the place where he was kissed, and he couldn't help but said, "We won't be trapped here forever. You don't need to be so desperate." "Really?" the other party asked without looking back, as if he just thought he said it casually. "Even if this doesn't work, I can still think of other ways. Even if nothing works, you will only be trapped, and I..." Renly stopped talking, looked at the other person's busy back, and sighed. He sighed, then turned and walked towards the beach. He was a little distracted along the way, but when he arrived at his destination, he still cheered up and began to check the surrounding environment. Unfortunately, even after circling the entire island, he didn't see anything he expected. In the shallows of the island shrouded in sunlight, there was nothing except a few coconuts and a broken wooden barrel. Foreign wandering items. Renly was a little disappointed, but then he stopped thinking about it, took off his upper body clothes, walked to the edge of the reef and jumped off. After the popping sound, the black-haired figure completely disappeared in the shallows here. It was not until a while later that he surfaced with an honest salmon and walked towards the direction of his residence. The situation seems to have returned to what it was before. However, not long after, another storm suddenly came. Thank you to the 322 book friends for the 1,000 rewards, thank you to Uncle Joel for the 600 rewards, thank you to the half-Buddhist book friends and old people in the deserted city for the 500 rewards, thank you to the flower-eating patient book friends, Shenjing Moyan book friends and 9100 rewards for book lovers of 9 bottles of orange soda, and thank you to the friends who voted for this book every day, thank you. Chapter 46. Although they had just experienced a storm not long ago, when the second storm came, the two were still in a mess. After the wind and waves calmed down, Renly even found that he had caught a cold. This made him quite depressed, and Rhaenys was a little worried about it. Although colds and flu are not serious diseases, they can still kill people in this era, especially in their current situation where there is no medical conditions at all. Renly didn't take it too seriously. He even walked towards the beach without waiting for his clothes to dry, wanting to see if he had any gains this time. Then he dragged back a broken sail with a mast. At this time, Rhaenys was staring at the messy camp in some trouble. She didn't know where to start. When she heard the noise, she turned around and looked, and she couldn't help but froze on the spot. Redwyn. She looked at Renly with her mouth open, and the other nodded, a bunch of dark purple grapes on a blue background, the emblem of the Redwyn family. The name doesn't sound like anything, but it is actually very important to them. The Redwyn family is loyal to the Tyrell family of the Reach in Westeros, but in fact their family is much older than the Tyrell family, who became the Lord of the Reach after the Conqueror War. The family is famous for its abundant wine production, and the fleet owned by the family is also one of the few naval forces in Westeros. Renly couldn't be more familiar with this family, because during the siege of Storm's End, it was this family that blocked the sea, while the Lord Tyrell family and other lords of the Reach were responsible for the land. He also knew the location of the Redwyn family's territory, the Arbor Island in the Summer Sea in the south of Westeros. It is basically on the same line with the southern coast of Dorne, which is the coast where the two were once. They must have had a ship damaged near here last night. Seeing the other party's stunned expression, Renly said, "Next we have to keep a close eye on it. Maybe there will be people in distress who are washed over by the current, or they will find this island and swim over, just like us back then." "You mean, we are likely to be saved because of this?" Rhaenys couldn't help asking. It was impossible for a simple stranded person to save them, but if someone came to search and rescue in the future, that was not certain, and Renly meant this, so he nodded. "Right." Rhaenys's mouth twitched when she heard this. She wanted to remain calm, but she couldn't help but smile. In the end, she no longer suppressed her emotions and hugged the person in front of her and cried with joy. Renly smiled and patted her back. He could feel the joy from the bottom of her heart. At the same time, he felt as if a big stone had fallen from his heart at this moment. Although it was still possible, this kind of thing still depends on God in the end. Facts have proved that God seems to treat him well. However, what he originally expected was not the so-called Redwyn, but the Dorne ship. He thought that the fact that he had set sail from a certain place in Dorne not long ago could not be concealed from the Dorne lords for too long, and if those people knew about it, they would definitely try their best to go out to sea to find and hunt them down. Now it seems that although it is unclear why Redwyn came to the nearby sea area, the situation is much simpler. After that, neither of them spoke again, all immersed in this good news. It was morning at this time, and the fresh air was accompanied by the warm and pleasant sea breeze. The sun hanging high in the sky above also exuded waves of warmth. The surrounding woods rustled, and the sound of the tide hitting the reefs remained the same, but when I heard it again, there was a different taste in my heart. But not long after, Rhaenys's excitement suddenly cooled down. She broke away from her arms, and looked at Renly's face with purple eyes, and her expression became a little complicated. "What's wrong?" Looking down at her, Renly still smiled. The other party opened his mouth, and then forced a smile. "Nothing, I just think it's better to repair the house first, otherwise I will be bitten by mosquitoes at night." "Then you find the raw materials first, I'll go to the beach to watch." After Renly said that, he turned and left, and the broken sail in his hand was also thrown in place by him. Unfortunately, he did not find anything else except the sail that day. After returning to the camp, the atmosphere that became much more silent also made him a little disappointed. The shed was not built that night, and neither of them slept well. But when they woke up the next day, the atmosphere here seemed to have returned to its original state, and the cheerful little queen became lively again. "When we return to King's Landing, I can show you a hill named after me. I plan to build a big garden there." Squatting in the camp and drinking lemon leaf tea, Rhaenys turned her head to Renly, who was also squatting next to her, and smiled. "I have planned for a long time, but I haven't found a suitable gardener. Maybe I should go to Highgarden to have a look. It is said that many people there know this." "I won't go to King's Landing with you." Renly, who was brushing his teeth with a small branch dipped in the ashes of the fire, replied vaguely, that city stinks. It stinks now, but it will get better in the future. Rhaenys said, just like my kingdom, it will get better and better. Renly couldn't help but turn his head to look at her when he heard it. What? You don't believe it? The other party asked with a raised eyebrow. Of course I do. Renly nodded. The establishment of the Targaryen dynasty marks the beginning of a new era for the Westeros continent. The Seven Kingdoms used to be independent and wars seemed to occur at every moment. However, after the unification, despite various civil strife and political conspiracies, it was much better than the original chaotic situation. However, this dynasty did not live long. Compared with the feudal families and the ancient Seven Kingdoms with a history of more than 1,000 years, the Targaryen dynasty was overthrown within 300 years of its establishment, led by the cheap elder brother Renly. The dramatic thing is that he, a member of the usurper family, came here to chat with the founder of the Targaryen dynasty. I wonder what her expression would be after she knew this. Renly thought secretly, and suddenly thought that the kings of the Targaryen dynasty were all descendants of the blood of the little queen next to him. If it is really based on the theory of bloodline, this person seems to be his ancestor. In the following period, he picked up many broken planks and broken wood on the beach of the island, as well as some items with obvious civilization, such as silver plates, broken wine barrels, etc. On the third day after the storm, he saw a pale male corpse. The corpse that kept floating with the tide made Renly silent, but he did not bring this emotion into the camp. The next day he saw several more corpses and more supplies. Although this was useless, it strengthened their confidence. Although there was no gain in the next few days, the two still had expectations for it. The days seemed to have returned to the past, but the atmosphere had some subtle changes. For example, Rhaenys no longer had physical contact with Renly casually, and her dress and daily life were not as casual as before. Some behaviors became serious. At the same time, she would deliberately keep a large distance from him when pulling the bedding roll every night. This was to avoid suspicion, and Renly had expected it. He has always understood and believed that some of the other party's emotions some time ago were just the broken jar idea formed after feeling hopeless to leave. Or she instinctively wanted to find an emotional sustenance to rely on each other in order to spend the rest of her life. Obviously this is not love, but a helpless choice. For Renly, this is a responsibility. As a passerby, he does not want to and cannot bear this responsibility, and Renly does not think that the two will really be trapped here forever, at least he will not. So he has always responded negatively to this. He can pretend not to know these things and then be casual and unrestrained, but some things can be lied about, but some are difficult to make up their minds to do. At this time, a ray of light appeared in the predicament, and the other party no longer thought about it, but wanted to maintain a simple friendship. Renly thought this was good, at least he didn't have to always think about whether he was a fool. However, one day, the other party said something to him intentionally or unintentionally. It's really small here, and you can't see many things. What do you want? Renly, who was squatting on the ground blowing his nose with a leaf after catching a cold, looked up at her. Nothing. The little queen blinked, and then suddenly asked, do you know what tansy is used for? And safflower. Renly was stunned when he heard this, but the other party turned around and walked away with a smile. The change happened 5 days after this conversation. Another fierce storm suddenly came, with the same intensity as the previous ones, but when Renly went to search on the beach the next day, he found a person. A living person. Chapter 47. At this time, a pale-faced young man appeared in the peaceful forest camp. He was leaning against a palm tree, wearing a woolen grey cloak that had been soaked in seawater and dried in the sun and became wrinkled. The cloak inside is a red and blue satin top. At the same time, the boots the other party wore were also made of fine calfskin, silently revealing his identity and wealth. But facing the short-haired woman wearing simple linen clothes in front of him, he was like a beggar meeting the richest local businessman, stammering and full of awe. Are you really your Highness Rhaenys? At this time, Rhaenys no longer had the same look and attitude she had in front of Renly, but became much more serious. After hearing this, she nodded and said, we were chased into the sea by the Dornish people, and the storm made us drift here. The words in her mouth made the young man who was slumped there couldn't help but glance at Renly who was standing next to him. The other person's obvious Dornish appearance made him shocked in his heart, but he did not dare to ask more, but looked weakly at the little queen. He said authentically, I am Leo of the Redwyn family, and Slit Redwyn is my father. Her Royal Highness, I am happy to serve you. But please forgive me for not being able to stand up and salute. I really don't have the strength. I won't blame you for this, Sir Leo. Rennis said, looking at the other person's pale face, and nodded, rest in peace for now. After you recover, I still have many things to ask you. Thank you for your understanding, Her Majesty the Queen. The other party bent over with great effort, and then collapsed back to the ground, gasping for air. His face was weak, and he looked as if he might die at any time. Fortunately, after this man drank a bowl of hot fish soup and slept, his pale face became somewhat rosy. Faced with the problems of the two people at the same time, they started to explain one after another. We were hunting the Dornish fishing boats around here, and looking for some of our compatriots who were killed not long ago, but we encountered a storm. Oh, you may not know, now everyone is saying that you have been in Dornish and was killed. His Majesty Aegon ordered our family to send a fleet to block the Dorne coastline and prevent them from fishing, but this damn storm caused us heavy losses. I'm not sure if anyone will come to rescue me, Your Highness, but if my father hears that my ship has sunk, he will definitely come to search for me. Well, if I remember correctly, there were several ships in the storm. It was not damaged, maybe they will remember the place where we met, but I am not sure about this, Your Highness. If the boats were not damaged, how could no one pick me up? His Majesty Aegon is currently in Dorne to avenge you. But we don't know where Your Majesty is. We just heard that the Dornish people tried to use crossbows against Your Majesty, and the result was heavy damage. The Dornish people seem to have fallen into an internal trap. I heard from a prisoner that many people seem to have died. But I don't know the specific situation. They even rowed boats out to sea like crazy. We didn't know why at first. Now I understand. Still weak, the noble boy named Leo fell into a deep sleep not long after, but his impact, or follow-up, completely changed the current situation. On the fourth day after he was fished out, 5 majestic and tall multi-masted ships appeared faintly from the end of the coastline. They were not heading towards the island at first, but Renly on the shore took the opportunity to raise a pile of wet signal black fog made of leaves and branches. The ships were soon rerouted. In the end, these 5 boats did not approach the coast of the island, but floated on the sea not far from the island. However, several small boats came closer as the sailors paddled, and finally a group of people came ashore. The leader, an old man with an excited face, looked similar to Leo, and the coat of arms of the Redwyn family was embroidered on the front of his satin jacket. The young noble who had regained some mobility stepped forward first, while Renly and Rennis stood on the beach. Soon after, the old man walked over quickly, knelt down on one knee, and respectfully kissed the finger extended by the little queen. It is an honor to see you alive, Your Majesty. Slit red wine is at your service. The island life that lasted for more than a month basically ended here. Facing the resurrected little queen, everyone who came was respectful, and the one who looked like a little girl to Renly was Lei. Nisai, at this time, has become as dignified and noble as a real queen, treating the people around her with a majestic expression, like a saint in the clouds. But when he got rid of those people and found Renly sitting in front of a tree root at the end of the beach, he returned to his usual smiling look. We are leaving here, are you happy? Renly shook his head, if I want to stay on the island, I won't leave with you. Aren't you awake? The other party asked funnily after hearing this, are you suddenly losing your temper? I'm serious. Renly said, I plan to stay here for a while before leaving. How to go? It's not like you don't know what I'm capable of. Renly said seriously, the sea can't stop me. I don't believe you can leave here on your own. Rennis frowned quietly, and this is not necessary. What can you do if you stay here? It's something very important that I can't tell you. These words made the little queen's expression startled, and then she narrowed her eyes. Are you scared? Why are you afraid? Renly asked, it's not like I've never been on a boat before. What am I afraid of? Rennis bit her lip, looking a little annoyed. You should be happy. Renly ignored her expression and waved his hand, although we are friends, many problems have not been resolved yet, but now let me say it. I don't want your money either. I don't want your dragon eggs, and I can't help you with anything. What a good thing it is for you to get home safely and get rid of me as a burden. I'm angry, please stop joking. I'm really not kidding. Looking at this man's expression, Renly gritted his teeth. Okay, to tell you the truth, although I don't know why, I caused those storms during this period, so I can't leave with you, otherwise more people will die if there are another storm, and all of this will happen. It's all in vain. It's a pity that the other party didn't believe what he said. You just said, do you really think I should be happy? That's right. Renly nodded. After the words fell, the other party turned around and left. Seeing this, Renly sighed, feeling as if he was playing a cry-wolf game. Farewell today, if nothing unexpected happens, we will say goodbye forever. In fact, he also has a lot of reluctance to say goodbye. But even if they are reluctant to say goodbye, there is nothing they can do. After all, they are not from the same world. They have to say goodbye no matter what, so it is better to be more decisive with your words so that everyone can get together and part ways. However, after a while, footsteps suddenly approached from a short distance away. Looking up, the little queen who had left was walking over with a wooden cup. I'll repay you by making you a cup of tea at the end. She handed over the cup in her hand and said expressionlessly. Are you serious? Looking at the cup of tea stretched out in front of him, Renly raised his eyebrows unconsciously. What? Are you afraid that I will poison you? Renys said in a disdainful tone, you saved me, I can't help but thank you, right? But there is nothing on the ship. I remember that you like drinking lemon tea, so I gave it to you by the way. I brewed a cup. You have to know that not just anyone can drink the tea I brewed. Renly smiled when he heard this, reached out to take the wooden cup and put it aside, saying, don't worry, I will go to King's Landing to visit you when I have the opportunity. After all, we can be regarded as... He didn't finish his words, because he just turned his head slightly, and a huge force suddenly came from the back of his head. He couldn't help but staggered. Renly stood up immediately, but he couldn't hide his dizziness, and even his steps staggering, his eyes stared at the beautiful figure in front of him with a mixture of surprise and anger. You stupid girl! Before he could finish his words, an oncoming fist instantly blinded his vision, and then he fell to the ground with a thud. You don't understand anything, you are a stupid man. Renys looked at the bruises on his forehead with some distress, and then kicked Renly hard. This makes me happy. With a snort, she turned her head and shouted orders to the group of people not far away. Someone, bring him to the boat. Chapter 48. A storm suddenly hit, and 2 of the 5 ships sank directly. Dozens of crew members were missing in the process, which was no different from death. The other 3 ships also had many leaks and broken places under the ravages of the storm. One of them was even tilted and declared scrapped. Fortunately, each of these crew members was an old sailor who had been sailing for many years. With their efforts to rescue, they did not sink. After the storm, the dark clouds in the sky slowly dissipated, revealing a ray of morning light illuminating the wet deck. The sea was still endless, and the sea was turbulent. The sailors who escaped death were busy repairing the ship inside and outside. It has been a while since the voyage, and the remote island has long been left behind, but some things on the island are still vivid, so when the storm stopped, the noble Queen Renys immediately walked out of her room and walked towards a room deep in the cabin. At this time, she had changed into a silver dress with mere lace trim, with long sleeves revealing the golden silk base, and her originally messy short hair was combed neatly and smoothly, with a slightly curled silver gold color that made her look more than 10 years younger. Her footsteps made a sound on the wooden floor, and the guards of the Redwine family followed behind her, protecting the queen who had escaped death, but when they arrived at their destination, they could only be ordered to stand outside the door to guard. After tidying up her slightly messy hair, the little queen immediately pushed open the black wooden door in front of her. The creaking sound attracted the attention of a young scholar in a grey woolen bachelor's robe in the room, and then he stepped forward and bowed, "Meet Her Majesty the Queen." The little queen nodded at him, and her eyes looked at the black-haired figure sleeping on the bed in the corner of the sealed room. "How is he?" "He wakes up every night." The young scholar replied in a low voice, "Eat and exercise." "Did he say anything?" The little queen couldn't help asking. "According to your instructions, we locked him in the room and didn't dare to get close to him. We just heard something vaguely." The scholar glanced at the queen in front of him, and his tone was hesitant, but he still spoke after the other party's frown. "Some disrespectful words, Your Highness, forgive me, they are all some words like stupid and idiot. Don't care what he says." Renys glanced at the sleeper and said disapprovingly, "He is a liar. Remember, don't believe a word he says." The young scholar nodded in response, and then whispered, "I suggest using sweet sleep grass instead, Your Highness. The effect of sleep grass will become weaker and weaker with the number of times it is used." I think it won't be long before he will be completely immune to it. You said that sweet sleep grass can be fatal. The little queen frowned. As long as the amount used is controlled and not used frequently, this may be very low, Your Highness. That won't work either. I just want him to be safe, but I don't want him to be in any danger. Rhaenys denied, you keep an eye on him. If it doesn't work, tie him up or lock him up. About this the young scholar suggested, can we use shackles? You can't use shackles. That won't work. You have to make sure he can't leave this room. But Your Highness, if we don't use shackles, we may. I will send 2 more people to you. The little queen could guess his concerns, so she interrupted him, but we are just helping, but you still need to keep an eye on him. If you have any physical condition, you must report it to me in time. At the same time, if he really recovers, you'd better not talk to him too much, and pay attention to some special methods he may use. Can I ask why, Your Highness? The scholar couldn't help but said, if I need to take care of his physical condition, it's hard for me not to talk to him. Then you must remember what I just said, he is a liar. The little queen said this, but couldn't help but smile, and then said with a stern face, if you really want to talk to him, you'd better be careful. The scholar nodded in response, but secretly disagreed. However, Rhaenys didn't care what this person thought. Her purple eyes looked at the person in the corner, her expression became a little complicated, and she ordered, go down now, I want to stay here alone for a while. After the words fell, the young scholar in the grey robe bowed and left, and Rhaenys gathered her sleeves and walked to the bedside, and then sat on the chair at the head of the bed. The room fell into a brief silence, and after a while, the solemnity on the little queen's face quietly dissipated, and she couldn't help but sigh. Don't blame me for doing this to you, but I really don't want you to leave. I'm even more afraid that you will lie to me and run away secretly. You have that ability, and I can't stop you if I don't do this. But I can't figure out what you are thinking about. Afraid? The Dornishman didn't tell you to be afraid, so why would you be afraid of this? The other party fell into a coma, so naturally no one answered her question, and Rhaenys didn't need anyone to respond. She sat at the head of the bed, quietly looking at the face in front of her, muttering to herself. I have written a letter, and I decided to keep my promise. There is a golden dragon egg in our family. I asked someone to bring it to me. When it is brought to me, I will consider giving it to you. Yes, I can consider this. Then you have no reason to leave, right? As she said this, she couldn't help but stretch out her slender fingers to touch the other party's cheek. The elastic feeling that was no different from that of a normal person made her frown unconsciously. Who are you? The faceless man should have a name, right? I still don't know your real name for so long. What do you look like? Are you ugly? Why did you save me? How many of your words are true? Countless questions made her frown even tighter. Thinking about it, you are really a complete liar. But I will always ask you about your background, unless you really don't want the dragon egg. As she said, she frowned and fell into deep thought, as if many things were bothering her. But after a while, the worry on her face quietly stretched out, leaned over and looked at the sleeper for a few times, she smiled, then gathered up the sleeves of her dress, stood up and prepared to leave. But just after turning around, she suddenly thought of something, turned back and said another sentence to the man on the bed. You'd better be able to sing, because I like men who can sing. After saying that, she hummed a melodious tune and walked out the door. She seemed to be in a good mood. However, the moment she pushed open the door, the joy in her heart disappeared instantly. Sister Visenya? How come, when did you come? Chapter 49. Sister Visenya? How, when did you come? There was a silver-haired female warrior standing outside the door. She was wearing a complete set of glazed black and red scales and a velvet cloak embroidered with dragons and flames. The buckle on the chest that fixed the cloak was a golden metal dragon inlaid with rubies. With a tall figure and deep purple eyes, was currently staring at the sister who looked slightly similar to her in front of her. Are you in love with him? Her voice was quite cold, and her words were straight to the point. Apparently she heard some noises in the house. These words caught Rhaenys off guard. She looked at her sister in front of her in astonishment, opened her mouth, but said nothing. However, without her opening her mouth, the woman named Visenya could clearly see everything she wanted to see from the other person's face, so she lowered her voice. Don't forget you're married. These words made the stunned little queen couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Yes, with my brother or one of his 2 wives. The queen frowned upon hearing this. Stop being willful, you are no longer a little girl. As she said that, she glanced at the unconscious man in the cabin room and frowned even more. He saved you, and we will give him the reward he deserves, but you'd better stay away from him and don't let Aegon see him. You don't need to worry about this. The little queen said without thinking, and then changed the subject. Where is my dragon egg? The other party pointed to his feet, where a silver-edged Nanmua box was quietly placed. Seeing this, Rhaenys knelt down and opened it. A touch of gold bloomed in front of her eyes, and she squinted her eyes unconsciously. Queen Visenya, who was looking down at her sister, said, "The Dornish people claimed to have captured you, but they couldn't hand over any of your tokens, so we thought you were dead." "He saved me, I already said that in the letter." The other party replied absently. Queen Visenya frowned again when she heard this. "I came to find you immediately after receiving the letter. I didn't even have time to inform Aegon." The little queen couldn't help but look up at her sister, who saw this and said again, "Your husband is very angry now and is avenging you in Dorne. I will go to inform him immediately that you are not dead. You need to let me take care of you. A word. Ask him to help me burn a few more Dornishmen." Rhaenys replied without hesitation, "Especially those in Hellgate Castle." "That's it. What else? Tell him I'm on my way to King's Landing and don't worry about it. I hope you won't regret it." Queen Visenya took a deep look at her sister and turned to leave. At this time, the ship was still slowly swaying forward on the rippling ocean surface. 3 huge grape-embroidered sails were taut, but there were no sailors on the deck. They had obviously avoided it in advance. And over the head of the ship, a dark yellow dragon with huge wings was circling and flying in the sky. As Queen Visenya screamed out of the cabin, the dragon's loud neighing sound suddenly filled the sky. The sound rang out and spread quickly in all directions, causing many sailors on another ship not far away to panic. Then the dragon landed, and the steady and floating ship suddenly creaked under the pressure. It climbed up on the dragon's back nimbly. Queen Visenya patted its neck to signal, so the dragon that had just landed jumped towards the sea below. However, at the moment of landing, it suddenly flapped its wings and rushed diagonally upward into the sky, eventually turning into a small black dot and disappearing from everyone's sight. Although there was no farewell, the movement outside was very obvious. When her sister left, Rhaenys finally breathed a sigh of relief, then turned to look at someone in the room, feeling a little headache. "What should I do with you?" Carrying the box and walking into the room, she raised her foot and closed the black wooden door tightly. Then she sat back on the chair in front of the bed. After thinking about it, she picked up the dragon egg and carefully placed it in the armpit of the unconscious man. After looking at it for a few times, she couldn't help but sigh, and then murmured in a low voice. "My sister asked me to hide you? But where can I hide you in this sea?" After hesitation, she thought about it and suddenly raised her eyebrows. "Why should I hide you? They don't know anything. You saved me, I thank you, what else? Aegon should repay you." These words calmed her mood a little, but she was still worried, so she sat there and thought quietly again. Unfortunately, not long after, her temporarily relieved heart was suddenly mentioned again. A terrifying scream suddenly rippled from outside the cabin, and it was still loud and clear through the wooden boards of the hull. The sound made Rhaenys tremble all over, and then she hurriedly ran to the deck outside the cabin to look, and saw 2 dragons riding dragons. The night was approaching this place quickly in the sky in front. The one behind was Visenya, who had just left, and it was impossible not to recognize the huge black dragon shadow Rhaenys in front. Aegon Targaryen. Her brother is also her husband. The little queen was a little panicked because of this, but she didn't have much time to react before the black dragon came close. The huge body hovering over the ship covered the sky, and the fluttering wind blew away some sailors who had just stepped out from below the deck. Staggering around. The dragon named Balerion did not land on the deck in the end because it couldn't be put down, but while flying at low altitude, a tall figure jumped down from above, and then quickly ran towards the woman at the end of the deck. "Rhaenys." He stepped forward and took the little queen's hands, his face full of excitement and joy. "Aegon, how come you are so fast?" Just now Visenya said. The little queen's expression was stunned and a little weird. The visitor couldn't help but think of some things he had heard before, and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes, so he said, "Where is the Dornishman who saved you? He is a warrior and a hero. I must repay him, and if possible, I will use him." Rhaenys opened her mouth when she heard it, but before she could speak, the other party looked at the entrance of the cabin in front as if he had thought of something, so he let go of his wife's hand and stepped over. "Wait a minute, Aegon, I..." The panicked voice behind him did not attract Aegon's attention at all. He entered the cabin wearing heavy armor. The wooden ladder at the entrance and the wooden floor of the cabin creaked when they were stepped on. Someone came forward to bow and then was ordered to lead the way. "I mean, I still have a lot of important things to tell you, Aegon, wait a minute." The little queen followed quickly behind him, holding up her skirt. "Nothing is more important than my gratitude now, Rhaenys. I can't imagine life without you, and you can't imagine how desperate I was when I heard the news of your death." The other party said without turning his head, and his footsteps did not stop. Rhaenys became more anxious after hearing this, but then a hint of determination appeared on her face, as if she had suddenly made up her mind. "I just want to tell you this." The back of the person in front of him trembled all over, and then his footsteps became more rapid. However, all thoughts and impulses stopped abruptly when they arrived at the door of that room. At this moment, whether it was Rhaenys with a firm gaze behind him, or King Aegon, who looked serious when he raised his hand and pushed the door open, they all froze on the spot unconsciously. There was a sweet smell in the air that came to his face, which was the special smell of the potion that had been lingering for a long time, but there was no one here. Looking into the room, the closed room was silent at this time, and several bottles of blue potions were mixed with sea navigation maps and placed on a table. The figure that should have been on the wooden bed in the corner has disappeared. All that can be seen is a pile of decayed pale dust, mixed with shrunken linen clothes and brown trousers, which looks like a dust-filled human figure, or a raised mannequin made of sand. And on the floor under this figure, a golden dragon egg that seems to have shrunk a lot quietly rolled there, and the metal-like surface flashed a dazzling luster as the light from outside the door poured in. Chapter 50. Day after day, I woke up and slept, and found myself in a cabin that was constantly shaking, but I didn't know exactly where I was. The long period of drowsiness made Renly's mind foggy. When he woke up, he had no intention of struggling to get out. He had already set sail and the situation was inevitable. When he was awake, he would read a book leisurely and boredly, and then curse a word or two from time to time, hoping to attract the stupid woman who avoided him, but she never saw her. So in the end, he didn't bother to think about these messy things, and he ate them as if he was completely unaware that the daily food contained some kind of special hypnotic substance. He was awakened when the storm came yesterday, but the situation did not develop to the worst, so he pretended that he didn't know anything and stayed in the room to sleep, waiting for a certain moment to come. He didn't know when this moment would come, but it would come sooner or later, so he slept peacefully. I don't know how long it took, but there was a special roar that revived his silent thinking, and a familiar but unreal voice came dimly in his ears. Not long after, another loud roar made the dazed Renly wake up completely. He heard the sound of footsteps quickly disappearing. When he looked sideways, he only saw a flash of silver skirt. The horn disappeared into the corridor outside the door, and then he found that he was holding a golden dragon egg in his elbow. This made him a little confused for a moment, and he subconsciously picked up the egg and looked at it carefully for a few times. But before he could think about it further, his eyes quickly went dark, and all the sounds around him suddenly disappeared. Extreme silence came, and in the darkness, countless memory scenes were born in the mind one after another, and at the same time, there were two information prompts. Successfully escorted Rhaenys Targaryen to Aegon the Conqueror safely. Your swimming skill level has been raised to LV6. You have completed all events, and you have obtained a special item, Queen Rhaenys's expectation. The large number of memories that surfaced quickly settled, and a certain name mixed in the information made Renly feel helpless and annoyed. However, when he opened his eyes and saw his surroundings clearly, he felt a sense of sadness. Everything in front of him was so dark that he couldn't see clearly. In the haze, there were many huge black skeletons standing quietly beside him, sitting slumped next to a huge dragon skull. Renly found that his short body was covered with black paint of dust. The touch under the buttocks was cold and hard. Looking up, the dragon skull that could have been seen had disappeared, and the hazy and dark ceiling was now faintly visible. Renly knew that he had escaped from that place in history and returned to King's Landing nearly 300 years later. He was currently in the cellars of King's Landing's Red Keep. And a certain dragon skull that originally stood here has turned into a piece of black dust. Melissus. He murmured the dragon's name, but what he was thinking about was the female dragon knight. Rhaenys Targaryen, the last child of Lord Aerion Targaryen of Dragonstone and Lady Valiana Velaryon, sister and queen of Aegon the Conqueror, was born in Dragonstone in 25 BC. Island lively, curious, impulsive and willful, likes dancing and music. During the War of Conquest, she rode the dragon Meraxes and attacked the Stormlands with Orys Baratheon, the founder of the Baratheon family, and finally completely defeated the Storm King Arya in a battle called the Last Storm. Urgila Durrandon, Storm's End surrendered, Orys Baratheon married the Storm King's only daughter, and the Baratheon family, which is still prominent today, was established. Rhaenys Targaryen later participated in the Battle of the Wilderness, and together with her brothers and sisters, they destroyed the combined forces of the Westerlands and the Reach. The royal family of the Reach that had been inherited for thousands of years was burned in this battle. Having no heirs, and therefore withdrawing from the stage of history, the Tyrell family, who were once the stewards of the royal family of the Reach, came to the throne and became the new lords of the Reach. After this battle, Rhaenys rode a dragon to the south of Westeros to force Dorne to surrender, but failed. The war officially broke out 4 years later, but the same effect was minimal. Eventually, she died in Dorne Hellgate Castle in the 10th year of the conquest calendar. The few paragraphs of records in the history book were memorized by Renly, but at first he only thought it was a paragraph of text, but now to him, these words have another meaning. Thoughts were swirling in his mind, and finally Renly sighed with a complex expression, then stopped thinking about it and looked down at his hands. He thought of the dragon egg, but when he glanced down, what he saw was an egg rolled down between his legs, covered by the hazy darkness. An egg? Renly was stunned for a moment, then reached out and pulled out this strange egg that looked about the same size as an egg, but its appearance seemed to be covered with golden scales. This thing looks very light, but in hand it is as heavy as an iron lump. Is this the dragon egg? He murmured, holding the egg upright in front of his eyes and looking at it carefully, his expression full of uncertainty. I remember correctly, what I saw before was clearly an egg the size of a baby's head. Why did it turn into such a virtuous person now? He couldn't help but think of Naga's ribs, which seemed to have shrunk a lot since the last instance. How can a dragon be hatched from such a small child? Renly frowned, but suddenly thought that even if this was a real dragon egg, he might not be able to hatch a dragon, and even if he could hatch a dragon, he might not be able to control it. Although he had the blood of the Targaryen family, in the long history of the dynasty, there were more than just the Baratheon family that obtained the blood of the Dragon King through marriage. And historical records show that even the Targaryens themselves sometimes couldn't hatch or even control dragons. So he casually put the egg into the pocket of the lining of his clothes, and decided to study carefully what he could do with it after returning. His blue eyes looked at the last remaining item beside him. It was a bunch of silver gold hair wrapped in red silk. It felt smooth and flexible when picked up and held in his hand, as if it had just been cut from a beautiful woman's head. After taking a closer look, Renly found a line of words written on the red silk wrapped around the hair. He glanced at it and was startled. I like men who can sing. When he saw the words clearly, it was as if a female voice was whispering in his ear playfully. When the voice fell, the hair in his hand suddenly turned into a hazy light spot mixed with gold and silver, like a group of silver-gold fireflies, floating and rippling from Renly's palm. The faint light emitted by the fireflies dispelled the surrounding darkness and covered Renly's cheeks with flickering. Finally, when these lights floated up to parallel with his line of sight, they gathered together, like a kiss, gently pressed against and disappeared on his forehead. At the same time, a message was born from his mind with a lot of related memories. You got the profession, Bard. Chapter 51. Memories of using a large number of musical instruments emerge from my mind one after another, such as flute, ancient harp, violin, tambourine. It seems that all the musical instruments that can be found in Westeros are not missing at the moment. In addition, there are some scenes of singing in crowded taverns and streets, and some of them do not seem to belong here. Some songs and tunes from the world that he had heard intentionally or unintentionally in his previous life were linked to each other. This memory is really complex. Sitting beside the dragon skull in the darkness, Renly even felt that his brain was faintly swollen. However, the memory came and went quickly. After it emerged, it began to disappear quickly. Finally, it was merged with his original memory, and it seemed like he had experienced it personally. Lowering his head and stretching his fingers, Renly felt that he was completely different from before. But before he could feel all this carefully, his originally stable heartbeat suddenly became faster, and the beating sound was like a drum roaring next to his ears, which was particularly obvious in the silent cellar. You have gained the professional characteristic, Musical sensitivity. With the rapid heartbeat, there seemed to be a faint tingling and numbness in his ears, but his mind seemed extremely clear at the moment, and his expression was a little dazed, but the changes did not stop because he was not in the state. Faintly, some noises that were previously inaudible gradually emerged from the surroundings: the sound of mice scratching in the wall, the buzzing of flying insects flapping their wings in the dark, the slight cold wind whistling from a corner and crack in the cellar. Jumping out, and rushing footsteps coming from nowhere. Feeling all these changes, Renly unconsciously lowered his head and looked at himself. Racial level, LV1. It was as if information that had remained unchanged for thousands of years floated out, and no other attributes emerged except this. Renly felt helpless about this. This system on his body is very crude, and it is not that simple to view information. For example, now, when he looks at himself alone, he can only see his physical condition. If you want to know all the information, you have to run to a mirror and look at your face, or look into your own eyes. Thinking about it, he stood up, took one last look at the empty ground beneath his feet, and then stepped toward the cellar exit. He's only 5 years old. 7 hells, you can fucking lose a 5-year-old child? You still have the nerve to tell me that he ran away on his own? Tell me again, how did he run away on his own? Ah! There was a commotion in the throne room at this time, and angry curses continued continuously. The voices echoed in the empty hall, appearing loud and full of tremors. I should really ask 2 old ladies with all their teeth to be my guards. Yes, that's what I should do. At least they won't lose my little brother. You? You two are fucking losers. Waste. What else can you do? The roar was followed by waves of soft persuasion and the loud collision of stools being kicked open. Some servants passing by outside the hall couldn't help but quicken their steps. Even the 2 fully armed knights guarding the door swallowed unconsciously. As if he was afraid that the volcano behind him that had been erupting for a long time would affect him. Lord Robert's young brother Renly suddenly disappeared while wandering around the castle. The 2 guards who were responsible for protecting him at the time could not give any clues except for being attacked by a black cat. This incident happened this morning, but it was already midnight, but still no one was found. The Red Fort is huge, but hundreds of people searched it thoroughly, and the result was unexpectedly found nothing. The new king, who was about to be crowned, was furious because of this. He sent people to intensify the search again despite constant scoldings. As a result, they even searched the dungeon of the Red Castle, but still no clues were found, except for a laundryman who claimed to have seen him. A child ran towards the maiden residence of the Red Keep. However, there was no sign of any children at all in the rectangular fortress, and all the surrounding places were searched, including Prime Minister's Tower, Magur's Tower, White Sword Tower, and the God's Wood. Sir Baristan of the King's Guard also specifically mentioned the cellar of the Red Keep. He claimed that the boy had been very interested in the dragon bones in the cellar, but he led a team to search but returned with no results. A living person just disappears. This is very common in the slums of King's Landing, but it is definitely not normal in a royal castle like the Red Keep. At this time, there were countless nobles, big and small, in King's Landing. With such a big commotion, it was natural that the news could not be concealed, and the gossip spread all over the sky. People speculated that this was probably an enemy assassin who had infiltrated the Red Keep and kidnapped the child. Some also speculated that the assassin was originally from the Red Keep and officially launched an attack at this time. Some people with bad intentions secretly claimed that this must be the work of Prince Rhaegar's wife, sons, and daughters who died tragically. They were tortured when they died, and now they are about to use the usurper's family to pay a blood debt. Blood payment. The last guess is still widely circulated among these nobles, because unlike other guesses, this one has evidence it is the Black Cat. 2 guards were attacked by a black cat, and in the blink of an eye the Baratheon boy disappeared. This order may not seem like much, but many nobles have been frequent visitors and courtiers in the Red Keep during the previous dynasty. Most of them know that Prince Rhaegar's daughter, a little princess with Dornish blood, once raised a dog named Balerion. Black Cat. In folklore, black cats are closely related to mysterious things such as witches and ghosts. The mysterious remarks frightened many young noblemen and women, and some girls even swore to their companions not to wander around the Red Castle to avoid seeing ghosts. However, when the new news came out, they were quite disappointed. The little guy named Renly was found, or he ran out on his own initiative, and the location was not somewhere else, but the Red Castle that had been searched several times. Some people did not believe it, but the fact was that many people could not imagine why there would be a place that could not be found to hide people after searching countless times with great effort. The angry Robert Baratheon and his courtiers even suspected that the little guy was lying. From the letters with the old Maester of Storm's End, Robert had learned that Renly liked to lie, and there might be other hidden secrets. However, when the person was questioned in the throne room, he swore to deny it and took out the sophistry he had thought of long ago. "There is a secret passage in this castle. I accidentally touched the switch and fell in, so you can't find me." As soon as these words came out, everyone in the throne room looked at each other in surprise. The kingdom's intelligence chief, the pink-robed eunuch named Varys, narrowed his eyes when he heard this, and then asked softly with curiosity in his eyes. "So where is the secret passage, child? I forgot where I fell in." Renly turned his head and looked at him with an innocent look on his face. "But there is a secret passage." Chapter 52. It has been said that there are secrets hidden in the Red Castle, but no one knows what secrets are. The castle began to be built during the reign of Aegon the Conqueror, and was not officially completed until the reign of Maegor Targaryen, the third king of the Targaryen dynasty. King Maegor was also known as the Cruel Maegor. He had many cruel deeds, and one thing related to the Red Castle was that after the completion of the castle, he ordered the killing of all the craftsmen involved in the construction. No one knows why he did this, but smart people can guess that this must be a cover-up, so if there is really a secret passage in the castle, it is not incomprehensible. It's just that this matter came from a child's mouth, and there is no evidence, so it is inevitable that people are suspicious. But doubts are doubts, and the fact that this 5-year-old child disappeared in the castle for a day without being discovered can already vaguely explain something. So when Renly, who was found, said this, Robert, who was originally angry, was directly diverted, and the Duke of the Vale, Jon Arryn, beside him, carefully asked Renly about his approximate location, and then talked about this with some other ministers. The fat man in pink robe, who was particularly noticed by Renly, also actively participated in it, and there was nothing unusual just by looking at his face. He is quite good at pretending. Renly thought to himself. He knew that there was a secret passage in the Red Castle because of the bad-ending TV series he watched in his previous life, but he remembered this because of Varys, the intelligence chief known as the octopus spider not far away. If I remember correctly, it seems that only Varys knew about the secret passage, and through this, he could eavesdrop on many hidden things. However, now this guy looks like an outsider who has nothing to do with him, and his performance is seamless. At first glance, I thought he was really innocent. Renly had some ideas because of this, but at this time he was more concerned about another question, that is, why he was not found. After being questioned in the throne room, he was taken back to his residence in the castle by the White Knight Barristan. On the way, Renly asked casually. "Sir Barristan, I heard that you went to the cellar to find me." "Yes, child." The White Knight replied, "Because I remember that you are very interested in dragons, so I thought if you ran away by yourself, you might go there." As he said that, he couldn't help asking, "Is it really a secret passage?" "Of course." Renly nodded, "It's pitch black and dirty, you can tell by looking at me." The other party glanced at him when he heard it. The dark green velvet top and trousers that he hadn't changed in time were indeed covered with black dust, which didn't look like the waste pile in a normal building. "It's a pity that you don't remember where it is." The White Knight sighed, and actually believed it in his heart. The child in front of him is very smart, but he doesn't look like a liar, and there is nothing else to explain what happened today except the secret passage. But if there really is a secret passage here? As a member of the King's Guard who protects the king, Barristan is very sensitive to such things. He believes that if there is a secret passage and he does not know about it, it is obviously his dereliction of duty. Before Robert, he had served 2 kings, and who knows whether the king he once protected was threatened by the secret passage. The White Knight's mood became a little depressed, and Renly did not speak again, but thought about what he had just said. He went to the cellar to look for it, but did not find himself. Renly narrowed his eyes. Although it is very hidden to hide in the pile of bones, if you look for it intentionally, it is impossible not to see it, right? And he did not seem to notice that such a large piece of bones was broken. It was broken after coming back? The 2 of them, one big and one small, each had their own thoughts, so this section of the journey was quite silent. As they continued to move forward, they followed the stone road to the central area of the castle. Soon, the building called Maegor's Tower came into view. Maegor's Tower was named after Maegor the Cruel, and the builder was self-evident. It was the residence of the king's families of all generations. It could be considered a castle within a castle. It was a huge square fortress with tall and thick walls and a dry moat covered with metal spikes. At this time, the drawbridge on the moat had been lowered. The two guards guarding the entrance bowed to the White Knight, who returned the salute and led Renly into the moat. Entering the lobby on the ground floor and going up along the building, he was finally brought to a room with a light green mere carpet on the stone floor. This was where he had lived for a long time. The White Knight then left, and after he creaked shut the thick oak door, Renly temporarily put aside his other thoughts and subconsciously touched the egg-shaped item in his pocket. After returning, he was busy dealing with the people outside and had no time to study the previous gains. He was not sure how to use the egg, but it was one of his few special items. In addition to this egg, he also has a bronze ring around his neck that can be used 3 times. There is also half a special bone hidden in the wooden box under the bed, but it seems that it is no longer useful. Thinking, he walked a few steps to the silver-plated round mirror hanging on the wall under the golden brocade in the room and stared at it. Racial level, LV1. Profession, Bard. Professional level, Entry level. Professional characteristics, sensitive to music. Possess knowledge, Heraldry LV7, Swimming LV6, Archery LV5. Possess knowledge, Poison making LV5, Dagger mastery LV5, Fishing LV2, Horseback riding LV2. LV1 omitted. Derivative characteristics, Psychic emblem, Mermaid breath, Returning bait. As he stared closely, a series of messages emerged from the mirror like mist. This appearance mechanism is very strange. It seems to be exposed on the mirror, but if you touch it with your hand, you will not touch any moist material at all, and the misty words will disappear. Renly believed that these words did not actually exist, but were a manifestation of his thinking. Because he could detect this kind of information without using a mirror, it was just a matter of how much. And that kind of awareness is carried out in the mind as if one's own thoughts were condensed on its own, rather than what it looks like in front of you. Renly was already very familiar with this, so he didn't pay much attention to this situation. He looked at the characteristics of the profession, and he was thoughtful. Renly couldn't ignore the appearance of a career column that he didn't know about before. At the same time, although he was not very interested in the bard, a career that relies on singing for a living, he had to pay attention to the characteristics derived from this career. At this moment, it seems that this profession is just getting started. If he takes the initiative to upgrade the level of this profession, will new characteristics appear? Compared with the skills and knowledge that are more difficult to improve the higher the level, this profession does not seem to be that difficult to improve. After all, it is still the lowest level at this time. At the same time, he had to think deeply about the meaning behind it. If bard is a profession, what about knight? Scholar, sailor, even wizard? The golden finger he possesses seems to hide many things that have not yet been discovered. Renly was thinking, suddenly startled slightly, and then looked towards the fireplace not far away. His hearing, which was much stronger than before, allowed him to faintly hear some special noises, and those seemed to be some sounds coming from behind the fireplace, the sound of shoes soles rubbing against the ground. Chapter 53. Obey, Master Renly. You are dirty. Come and take off your clothes first. Look, the water is hot and not cold at all. A daily conversation between a maid and her young master was taking place in a certain room in Magur's tower in the Red Keep. You can take off my clothes, but I don't need you to help me take a bath. The boy's voice was full of childishness, and his tone was also full of children's unique funniness of pretending to be a little adult. I can just wash it myself. You won't be able to clean yourself if you wash it yourself. Young master, be obedient. There is nothing to be ashamed of. The young maid's voice then sounded. Her gentle voice seemed to be very good at taking care of children. However, at this time, she faced the right guy doesn't seem to be into this. Who is shy? Do you think I am a 3-year-old child? The voice was dissatisfied, but then seemed to change its mind. But you can help me unbutton this button. It's too tight and it's full of dust. The maid heard the sound, and then there was a rustling sound, but after a while, the children's displeased words came again. I told you to unbutton, why are you unbuttoning my pants? I told you I can take them off myself. Then let me unbutton it for you, master. I'm sorry. The maid apologized quickly. What's your name? The child asked. Belina, Master Renly, my name is Belina. Okay, Barina, now go out with my clothes and close the door tightly. I will take a shower by myself. If you are very free, just find some fun. We will stay outside, Master Renly, if you need us. No need, get out now. The aristocratic young master's pretense made a fat man who was secretly eavesdropping shake his head. After discovering that what followed was just a trivial sound of water entering, footsteps and opening the door, he felt that there was no need to listen anymore. So he moved his body quietly, crawled along the narrow passage and left the dark wall in front of him. He thought that this trip was completely his own imagination and his suspicion was too serious. However, at the moment he left, the child who was squatting in the bathtub suddenly glanced over and looked at the fireplace that had been out of use due to the sweltering summer heat, with a thoughtful expression. His enhanced hearing allowed him to detect some unusual noises behind the fireplace before. Although this was a bit unexpected, it was also reasonable. After all, he revealed someone's secret, or an important trump card, and it was inevitable to attract the other person's attention. But he didn't expect that guy to be so fast. When Kingsguard Baristan took him back to Magur's tower, many beings in the throne room were still discussing the secret passage he mentioned. However, not long after he arrived at Magur's tower, the guy who was supposed to be participating in the meeting in the throne room ran over, or maybe sent someone over, which really surprised him. At first, Renly was wary of this, thinking that this might be someone who wanted to do something evil to him, or even kill someone to silence him, so he carefully hid in a corner that was not corresponding to the fireplace and watched quietly, preparing to strike first if something bad happened. If you want to be strong, who cares about him, stab him to death first. However, after a long time, there was no mechanism or similar noise there. There was only silence. Until the maids came later to bring bath water, nothing abnormal happened. So Renly became aware of the purpose of the person hiding in secret, and then there was a burst of instinctive rejection until the other person left, and he shook his head unconsciously. There is indeed a reason why spiders are not welcome. Muttering, he recalled something about the kingdom's intelligence chief, but found that his impression of it was already very vague. It seemed that the well-informed eight-clawed spider had his heart set on a certain mother of dragons who might not have been born yet. But later he tried to stab him because of Dragon Mother's tyranny, and then he was beheaded. What I said before. The show spanned a very long time, and the characters' later scenes were so few that Renly couldn't remember what he had done before. He used a secret passage to save a certain dwarf? For the country and the people? This impression made him feel a little strange, because he had heard that Varys was not from Westeros, but from the free trade city-state on the next continent. There was still slavery there. He felt that if the other party really had such thoughts, it's impossible to come all the way here to express your ambition. He didn't have much impression, so he simply suppressed these things in his heart and stopped thinking about them. He also ignored the situation at the fireplace for the time being. An Xin leaned against the small wooden barrel behind him, feeling the warmth of the water coming from all directions. He breathed a sigh of relief, and his blue eyes unconsciously looked at everything around him. This bedroom is not big, but it is very elegant. Exquisite brocades and furniture are dotted everywhere. The cooling fireplace is cleaned cleanly. A large feather bed that seems to be able to sleep 3 adults is placed in the center of the room. The feather bed there are sea blue silk curtains and oak bedposts carved with antlers, birds, and other animals. There is a protruding stone balcony directly in front, with a large window and light-colored curtains that sway as the cool evening breeze blows in. There is a small round table and stools near the window, with several neatly stacked books on the table. The parchments lying there were those that Maester Crescent had asked Renly to take with him when he left Storm's End. What satisfied Renly the most was that this room had a neat and dry marble toilet, the entrance was in the corner of the room near the main door, and even the brown wooden door was carved with some interesting floral patterns. Overall, this place was much more exquisite than his bedroom in Storm's End. If you don't consider the discovery just now, the environment was also very reassuring. So Renly closed his eyes. Although less than a day had passed on the surface, what he actually faced was far different from this. The long-term running around and fatigue had already exhausted his mind. In addition, after coming out, he had to intrigue with these people again, which made him really sleepy. At this time, he just wanted to empty his mind, then think about nothing and take a comfortable bath. Unfortunately, although the hot water around him made him feel quite comfortable, his mind couldn't be emptied at all. Everything in the copy, real or fake, the strange storm, his own changes, a capricious woman, the anomaly that was not found in the cellar, and the egg. Thinking of this, he suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look at the bed not far away. At this time, under the silk pillow on the feather bed, a trace of gold was looming as he looked at it, which made the black-haired boy in the bathtub touch his chin unconsciously. How to use it? Try to hatch it. It's so big, there's not much hope. Thinking about it, he decided to ask where there is a library in the castle tomorrow, and then check if there is a record of such a big dragon egg or hatching. If there is a criminal record, then try to hatch it, and if not. Thinking back, the chaotic thoughts gradually dispersed, and the touches from everything around him made him a little drowsy, so in the end he closed his eyelids and fell asleep quietly in the wooden barrel. Renly had a dream. In the dream, he seemed to have returned to the era of his previous life. He was in a restaurant. A waitress with silver curly hair came up to ask him what he wanted to eat. He ordered a plate of scrambled eggs with tomatoes. Chapter 54. Although he decided to confirm the dragon egg the next day, when Renly woke up, he had no desire to get up. His short body was deeply sunken in the soft feather bed, his blue eyes looked at the slowly floating sea blue curtain above without any focus, and he felt as if he was not wearing anything. He touched it with his hand, and it was true. Renly couldn't figure out how he got into bed. The last impression he had was that he was taking a bath, then fell asleep, and then, with that fireplace, how could he sleep so soundly? He secretly blamed himself for being careless, and then Renly felt a little headache. It was not a headache, but a real headache. At the same time, he also felt that his throat was dry, his nose was a little blocked, and he seemed to have no strength all over his body. Caught a cold? Caught a cold? The boy lying on the bed couldn't help frowning, then raised his arm to look at his little hand, gestured for a while, and then he sighed. It would be a joke if a time traveler died of a fever. Thinking of this, Renly looked around, then stretched out his arm with difficulty to touch the gilded bell on the bedside table. A crisp sound rang out, and not long after, a black-haired maid hurried in, and then after discovering the boy's condition, she hurried out the door to find a maester for treatment. In this era, even a common cold can kill people, especially for fragile children. Medical conditions are limited, and even the king's children can hardly guarantee that they will live to adulthood smoothly, let alone ordinary civilians or even farmers. Fortunately, Renly's luck was pretty good when he was reincarnated, and someone would come to treat him in time when he was sick. So after a while, a bald old man with a neat and beautiful white beard named Pycelle came in with a medicine box, and then, under Renly's stunned gaze, he used silver pliers to pick out a twisting black leech from it. What do you want to do? Bloodletting is not a common method, but it is very effective. But you are too young, child, to be treated with formal bloodletting, so I need to use leeches. Don't worry, it's actually not that scary. I just caught a cold, why do I need bloodletting? Renly asked in astonishment. He had caught a cold when he was at Storm's End, but at that time Maester Cresson mostly prescribed him potions. Although they felt useless, they were not as exaggerated as they are now. Of course this is very necessary. We all know that diseases are body fluids in the human body. I mean, child, don't worry, you will be cured in no time. I don't need this. Renly looked at the other person like a fool. How can you treat a cold and fever with bloodletting? This thing is very unreliable at first glance. And if I remember correctly, the founding president of a superpower in the previous life was killed by bloodletting. Good boy, it's just a little uncomfortable, it won't hurt too much, come on. The old man ignored the black-haired boy's refusal, lifted Renly's arm by himself, and then prepared to put the leech down. Seeing this, the boy quickly retracted his arm, and then faced the old man with a white beard, narrowed his eyes and threatened, if you dare to put it on my arm, I will go to Robert and say that you molested my maid. The old man couldn't help but shudder at this, and stared at the boy in front of him with wet eyes in astonishment. Child, how can you say that to an old man? This is not a polite thing. As a grand scholar who has served 3 kings, I think I have to. Whatever you say, anyway, if you dare to put it, I dare to go and complain. Renly answered dryly. The citadel of Old Town has cultivated a bachelor class throughout the entire Westeros continent. Bachelors assist nobles from all over the country to govern their territories, and the bachelor who assists the king is called a grand scholar, and there is only one in the country. The grand scholar is responsible for taking care of the health of the king and his family, as well as managing letters from ravens from all over the country, etc. He can also attend the royal meetings to decide state affairs, and is considered an important official of the kingdom. This is a job that only people of high moral character can be competent for. However, if I remember correctly, the grand scholar in front of me, who looks to be in his 60s or 70s, seems to have been visiting prostitutes. I remember that he is not a good person, so he said this without any psychological pressure. The child seemed to be very unreasonable when he was throwing a tantrum, so the old scholar could only retreat. After prescribing a few potions, he ordered the servants to bring a brazier to bake nearby, and gave a few precautions, which was considered to be a hasty end of the treatment. After such a commotion, Renly didn't even have confidence in the potion prescribed by the other party, so when the grand scholar left, he directly poured the potion into the urinal, and then prepared to curl up in the quilt to sweat it out. He had no strength at all, so he ate lunch in bed. A servant brought a small table to the bedside, and 3 neatly dressed maids brought plates of fragrant food. There were crispy white bread, vegetable and fruit salad, fried sweet corn cakes, crab pie, roast lamb with leeks, fried bacon with white beans. There was so much food that Renly, who had been drinking fishy soup for a long time, was a little overwhelmed, but in fact he didn't have much appetite. After being fed a few strawberries by a brown-haired maid, he couldn't eat any more, but thinking that he had to eat more when he was sick, he reluctantly ate a small piece of soft bread and half a corn cake, and finally waved to them to leave, and then fell into a deep sleep on the feather bed. After 3 consecutive days, the sudden illness finally eased. During this period, his cheap brother Robert came to visit him, but he left in a hurry soon. He was obviously busy with many things. The second brother Stannis never showed up. It is said that Stannis basically spent this time in the port of King's Landing, intensively preparing a fleet, and then attacking Dragonstone Island in the eastern sea of King's Landing, where the last remnants of the Targaryen dynasty currently reside. Yes, although the capital was occupied, the Targaryen family was not completely wiped out at this time. The queen of the former king and their royal fleet had already hurried back to Dragonstone, the home base of the Targaryen family, before the fall of King's Landing. None of this had much to do with Renly. After his condition improved, he focused on the closed fireplace in the room. Don't worry about the dragon egg. The thing is there and there is no way it can escape. Not long after leaving the dungeon, he planned to rest for a while, so he didn't study how to leave the Red Fort and go out to get the source of another smell he smelled before. Although I might consider leveling up for my newly acquired profession, that is obviously a long-term thing, and there is no need to start right away. So after his first breakfast after recovering from his illness, he dove into the narrow fireplace and groped carefully. The short body was able to move smoothly in the open fireplace, but he didn't gain much at first. It wasn't until he fumbled back and forth several times and relied on his sensitive hearing that he discovered some clues. So he raised his hand and pressed a certain stone brick diagonally above the fireplace, and the wall on the side of the fireplace suddenly creaked and turned over, revealing a dark and deep hole. There was a cold air wafting out from the inside of the cave, as well as a damp and moldy smell. Renly ran out and lit a candle, and then climbed in through the hole. But he came back after a while, with a gloomy look on his face. If you want to build a secret path, just build a secret path. What kind of maze are you building? Muttering, he blew out the candle in his hand and fumbled with the switch just now, so the entrance to the secret passage flipped and closed again. Renly then crouched in front of the fireplace, lost in thought. Although due to his remarks 2 days ago, a strict search was being carried out in the Red Keep, judging from the words of the servants, it seemed that no one had discovered the real entrance to such a secret passage. At first, he claimed that there was a secret passage just to get rid of the accusations of his brother Robert and to find a reasonable explanation for his whereabouts. As a result, the more he came into contact with it, the more he paid attention to it, and now it has even risen to the point where it must be solved. Renly had actually been thinking about whether he could use this secret passage before. Among other things, if this secret passage could lead to the outside of the Red Keep, it would be much more convenient for him who was grounded. However, Renly now believes that this secret passage must not be left alone. For now, the most important thing for him is to grow up smoothly. Others, whether it is the title he may be awarded in the future, how long the Baratheon dynasty can last, or even exploring the mysterious Golden Finger are secondary. The secret passage in front of us is already a serious threat, because it extends in all directions and seems to be connected to all the rooms in Magur's tower. Even if Renly moves out of this room, he cannot avoid it, and Magur's tower is already the most important place in the Red Keep. It's a safe place. It's like this here. What about the other buildings outside? Renly didn't think he could leave the Red Keep or even King's Landing in a short time, which meant that he might live here for a long time. He could consider killing the person who knew the secret passage and completely occupy the secret, but he could not guarantee that only Navarus knew the secret passage. Therefore, the most effective and fastest way to solve the hidden dangers at the moment is to expose this new discovery to the public and make it known to everyone. Just how to expose it also needs to be considered. This situation was different from when he was at Storm's End. At that time, he had no worries because everyone was familiar with him. However, the forces in King's Landing and even the Red Keep were intertwined, and his relationship with the Baratheon family could hardly be called friends. He was still young, and a simple cold made him a little unbearable, but he didn't want to be noticed again, especially about the secret passage, which he had already mentioned once. Secretly turn on all the switches in other rooms? Renly was a little hesitant about this, but when he discovered that a pair of twin neighbors suddenly moved into Magur's house, he suddenly had a new idea. Chapter 55. The two new neighbors were twin boys with orange hair, one named Horace Redwine and the other named Haba Redwine, with grapes embroidered on their lapels. It was obvious that they were from the Redwine family of the Arbor Island in the River Reach, or in other words, they were the two sons of the current Earl Redwine. Because they were still young and there were too many people in the Red Keep at that time, they were arranged to live in Magur's Holdfast. When they first moved in, the twins cried and screamed loudly, and the sound was very obvious. With his sensitive hearing, Renly vaguely knew that it seemed that one of them was scratched on the face by a black cat after entering the Red Keep. It seems that it is not serious, just a little disfigured. But the parties involved seemed to be unwilling to give up, and they made a lot of noise, and it seemed that half of Magur's Holdfast could hear it. 7 gods save me, how can they have such a loud voice? Not only loud voices, but also bad tempers. A servant passed by and whispered. With his sensitive ears, Renly could hear what they were saying even if he was sitting on the balcony. I remembered a midwife in my hometown in the countryside. Every time she went out to work, she would shout louder than the women who were giving birth. I still remember one time, she scared the woman in the next village. It would be great if all the young nobles were as quiet as Master Renly, although he sometimes loses his temper. Yes, the little guy is good in every way, but he is a little shy. The voices of discussion gradually faded away. Renly selectively ignored the remarks about himself in these words, but kept thinking about the useful information in them. Finally, he looked at the fireplace not far away and touched his chin thoughtfully. That night, the twin brothers who had just moved into the new room in Magur's tower were sleeping well, and suddenly heard a very scary sound coming intermittently, faintly like the cry of a child, and the eerie smile of a gargoyle. The strange sound was low and obvious, but it was impossible to find the exact location. So one of the twins, the orange-haired short one, was frightened and cried and howled and wet the bed, while the other one, who was slightly taller, ran out of the room screaming and shouting that there was a ghost. That night, there was a lot of noise in Magur's tower. When someone comforted the two twins, it was already past midnight and dawn. However, although many people were alarmed, no one cared about the ghosts of the two little guys. Instead, they just thought that it was just a nightmare or that they were not used to the new place. However, at midnight the next day, the two little guys started to make a terrified noise again, and then cried and shouted that they had to go home or not live here anymore. The servants who were responsible for taking care of them therefore discussed with the court steward, but the rooms in the castle were basically occupied at present. If they wanted to change places to live, they could only send people to clean up some abandoned towers first. Otherwise, the twins would not be placed in this royal residence. So the old man could only choose to continue to comfort the two young masters of the family, and finally completed this task reluctantly. On the third day, after breakfast, Renly pretended to wander around and found two twin boys who looked a little depressed in a fountain courtyard outside Magur's tower. He approached them and asked curiously, "Did you really see a ghost?" The morning after the twins moved in, the palace steward arranged for them to meet, so they knew each other. Really, the sound was scary. The tall orange-haired boy said weakly, and the short boy shrank his neck when he heard it, and then waved his fat little fist again, and his ugly face full of freckles was full of anger. "Even if it's a ghost, don't let me see it, otherwise I will make it taste my father's power," Renly exclaimed, then looked at some guards not far away, and whispered, "I guess it's not a ghost." These words made the two children who looked similar startled. "If it's not a ghost, then what is it?" "It must be a person," Renly said. "I'm telling you, you just arrived and you don't know, there are many secrets in this castle, such as secret passages in the wall." "Secret passage?" The fierce short boy wrinkled his nose, my dad said that only mice can dig holes, so there are secret passages where the king lives. Of course. Renly nodded, I fell into it 2 days ago. It was pitch black inside, but it was very big. I suspect someone used this secret passage to scare you. Why scare us? The short boy was stunned. How would I know? I don't believe it. The tall boy shook his head and said, that's a ghost, how could it be a person? Your home is not far from Old Town. Haven't you heard the maesters there say that there are no weird things in this world? Renly snorted and said, but whether you believe it or not, I will find this secret passage. They don't believe me, but as long as I find it, I will make them convinced and buy me a lot of good things. Well, you know, I found something that no one knows about, which must be a great achievement. The twin brothers looked at each other in surprise. Is it really a person? Is there really a secret passage? They asked in unison. It must be the case, the person in the secret passage. Renly nodded, and then suddenly asked with interest, how about it, do you want to find it together? Why should we join? What's the benefit? Benefit? Renly pretended to think and said, the benefit is that I get the credit, and you can have a chance to catch the person who scared you. Do you really think that's a human? The dwarf boy asked again after hearing this. Of course, I don't believe there are ghosts in the world. The maesters all say. I join. Before Renly finished speaking, he clenched his fists and nodded, his ugly face full of freckles gnashing his teeth. The tall orange-haired boy rolled his eyes and asked curiously, you just said merit, this is also a merit. Of course, this is the Red Castle, where the king lives. If I discover a secret that even the king doesn't know, it will be terrible. Renly said, pretending to be serious and saying his other purpose. But if we want to catch the man who scared you, we can't tell others immediately even if we find the secret passage. Why? Have you heard a saying that digging up the haystack will startle the snake inside? If we tell others about it after we find it, the man will definitely not appear again. So after we find the secret passage, we should first secretly tell this news to my eldest brother Robert and ask him to catch it. My eldest brother is very powerful. In this way, we can both get credit and catch the fake ghost. Of course, the credit is mine, you can't compete with me. The black-haired boy's words sounded like he admired Robert very much, but in fact, he didn't trust him at all. If that rough and cheap eldest brother was really reliable, he wouldn't have to play so much trouble. He would just go and make a small report. At most, he would think about how to make a report so that he could behave more like a child. Relatively speaking, although the second brother Stannis is a bit stinky, at least he won't get drunk and talk nonsense. It's a pity that he hasn't been seen recently. Why should the credit be yours alone? The short boy was unknowingly led into the corner by Renly. Of course it's mine, otherwise it can't be yours. Renly replied in a displeased manner, which made the other party blush and seem a little suffocated. The tall man next to him blurted out a sentence. We can find it ourselves. This made Renly stunned, and then frowned. You can't find it yourself. Why can't you find it? The short man also reacted at this time, with a smile on his face, why can you find it but we can't? Because I fell in there, everyone knows it. We don't know, but we have to find it. That's right. We have to go. Then we find it, the credit and the fake ghost will be ours. They said, made a face at Renly, turned around and ran away with a smile. They ran very fast, and seemed a little impatient. After looking at the backs of the two for a while, Renly scratched his head and suddenly felt a little troubled. Although he deliberately provoked them, it was just a prelude for him. He didn't expect these two guys to be so impatient. His original idea was that he was also involved, so all the words before sounded reasonable. The original plan was to take these two guys around casually, and then accidentally find some clues or something. After finding the clues, he said something to stimulate the two guys, so that they would leave him alone and work alone, so that he would almost get rid of himself, or it didn't matter if he couldn't get rid of him. With two shields, the pressure he would bear would be much less. As a result, they turned their faces directly now. Chapter 56. Although he felt that the two little guys were a little impatient, Renly still decided to continue with the planned plan, because he thought about it again and felt that it was actually no big deal. However, this idea disappeared without a trace after the incident actually happened, and Renly really realized what kind of creature a naughty child was. Not long after the conversation, the two children suddenly discovered a secret passage behind the wall at the head of the bed while playing indoors, and then the twins, who seemed to be quite courageous, were scared to death just because it looked too dark inside. Obviously, in this situation, they could not remember Renly's instructions at all, so they screamed in panic and caused the guards to break in, and then the entrance to the secret passage in Magur's tower was completely exposed to everyone's sight. Magur once ordered the execution of all the craftsmen who built the Red Castle. We should have guessed it long ago. Duke Tywin of the West said this to his 3 younger brothers when he learned about this. How did the 2 children find out? They accidentally touched the switch while playing. The Duke's youngest brother, Gillian Lannister, said with amusement, I heard that they asked Robert, who rushed over for credit. They said it was a great achievement. I'm really curious about how our Lord Redwyne educated his 2 precious sons so interestingly. It is indeed a great achievement. Another brother, Tygett Lannister, snorted coldly, I am more curious about how our Lord Robert will reward these 2 little guys from the River Bay. Old Redwyne is not very willing to send his 2 sons as hostages. This has nothing to do with us for the time being. The Duke's second brother Kevin said while looking at his eldest brother, who was listening quietly. I heard that Stark took his people to Dorne. Because of his sister. Besides this, I can't think of any other reason. Kevin said, and said meaningfully, Rhaegar has abducted the wolf girl for so long, what should have happened has already happened. This may be an opportunity. Our good niece is no worse than any girl. As long as Robert. This is unlikely. His brother Gillian frowned, I heard that our Lord Robert loves the wolf girl of the Stark family to death. Love him so much that he can't help but go to the brothel every 2 days. The bright golden-haired Tygate said sarcastically, I also heard that he has an illegitimate daughter in the valley. This can only mean that he is energetic in some aspects, but this sometimes does not affect feelings. Which lord doesn't have an illegitimate child outside? Gillian said, suddenly thinking of something, and added another sentence. Except our eldest brother. The person he was talking about just glanced at his younger brother silently after hearing this, and then said calmly, I have some ideas about Cersei, but for now we should consider Jaime. Since Robert is going to sit on the Iron Throne, the King's Guard of the previous dynasty may not count. The King's Guard is a noble position. They are responsible for protecting the king and swear to never marry. After joining the position, it means giving up their previous status and rights in exchange for a white robe of honor for life. However, not everyone is eager for this honor. At least, Duke Tywin has always been dissatisfied with his heir being named a King's Guard by the Mad King of the previous dynasty. He has only one qualified son, and being a King's Guard means that his son has to give up the inheritance rights of the Lannister family in the West, which is obviously not well intentioned. There were countless nobles in King's Landing at this time, and each of them had their own ideas and demands. The winners were ready to share the benefits, and the losers hoped to recover their losses. The changes brought about by a war were enough to affect the fate of the entire family, not to mention the change of dynasties. However, despite the undercurrent, the secret passage of the Red Castle still attracted their attention. The Tully family in the Riverlands, the Tyrell family in the Reach, the Lannister family in the West, the Arryn family in the Vale, and the secondary lords under their respective command, all of which had reached a certain scale of family size, could not ignore this matter, and some were even frightened and sweated. There had been rumors of a secret passage in the Red Castle before, but it did not attract much attention because there were no clues and sufficient evidence to prove it. However, the facts were in front of them at this moment, and they could not ignore it. The secret passage of Magur's Tower was not too scary. After all, it was the residence of the royal family. Except for some great nobles who had a marriage relationship with the royal family, most nobles did not think that they had any connection with Magur's Tower. But since there are secret passages in the most important Magur's Holdfast in the Red Keep, what about other places? The Prime Minister's Tower, the Throne Room, the White Sword Tower, the Maiden's Residence, and even the cathedral in the castle. As the core of the entire kingdom, the Red Keep is naturally the center of politics and power. And it is difficult for the nobles of Westeros, big and small, to say that no one of their family members has lived or worked in this place. Countless political decisions, countless conspiracies, poisonings, betrayals, filth, power struggles. Most people keep disguises outside, but who would still wear a mask in their own room? Not to mention that the secret passage can not only be used to eavesdrop on news, but also allow people to enter the royal family's living rooms unimpeded. Even the king's residence is like this, wouldn't other places be even more unsafe? Many people were eager to know how many secrets the entire castle had, so the day after the entrance to the secret passage was exposed, a thorough search began in the Red Castle. Unlike before, the search, which was aware of the seriousness of the problem, was even mixed with destructive nature. Then, as expected, people discovered the secrets in one building after another, and it was difficult for everyone to remain calm after seeing everything shocking. The entire Red Castle seemed to have been riddled with holes. So before the new king was crowned, the proposal to rebuild the Red Castle was already on the temporary royal conference table. In general, this is actually a good thing. After all, it is now a period of dynasty change. No matter what happened in the past, it basically doesn't count. Even if there are many dirty things that may be known to others, they were carried out in the previous dynasty. Can the new king still pursue them? However, some people are happy and some are sad. Most people are happy to see the exposure of the secret passage, but a bald fat man who loves to put powder on his body got into trouble because of it. As the chief of intelligence, it is hard not to suspect that Varys the eight-clawed spider already knew about the existence of this secret passage. After all, he has always been known for his unexpected mystery and unattainable intelligence ability. Now it seems that it is because he has mastered the secret passage of the Red Castle? If this is true, how many secrets does he have? Countless hostilities, whether explicit or implicit, have been cast on the chubby, non-threatening eunuch, which made the person involved miserable for a while. In the previous dynasty, he was the Minister of Intelligence and was highly valued by the Mad King. Now that the Red Castle has a new owner, he still retains his original position. This is naturally not because Robert has no grudges against the enemy's confidants, but because Varys proved his ability and value in front of him. So he saved his position in life. But now, he felt that this matter was very strange. How come the first boy just fell into the secret passage, and someone went to scare another couple, and then they found out? An enemy discovered his secret? Then used the child to target him? Many faces flashed through Varys' mind, but he was not sure. What he didn't know was that because of the unreliability of the twins, he didn't step into the trap set by someone's words, otherwise the situation would be worse. But for now, he has been overwhelmed by it. How to eliminate other people's suspicion, how to cover up his past actions, how to regain the trust of the new king. However, the occurrence of an incident temporarily suppressed the limelight of this matter and relieved Varys of some pressure. The Duke of the North, Eddard Stark, returned from Dorne and is currently heading towards King's Landing. At the same time, a raven sent a letter saying that the Duke's sister, Lyanna Stark, Robert Baratheon's fiancée, the wolf girl who caused the war, had unfortunately died of illness in Dorne. Then came the issue of the future queen. Chapter 57. He was too young, and the situation at Storm's End was different. No one would come to Renly to tell him about this, so by the time he knew it, it was already the third day after the news came. Renly had been back for nearly a week at this time. His long-term dungeon career had made him a little mentally exhausted, so during this period, except for the secret passage, he basically ate and slept, including the bard. Including his career, he didn't bother to think about most things. There is plenty of food and fish all day long, and sometimes he is too lazy to even eat by himself. There are no difficult situations, no need to rush around, and no one is nagging in his ears. He feels that his life is real. Some salted fish. Of course, between eating and walking, he still did some serious things, such as reading books to figure out the dragon egg problem. The feedback was terrible. I have never seen such a small egg. He had actually expected this. After all, no matter how deformed it was, the eggs laid by a dragon and a chicken could not be the same size. And he remembered correctly, the egg was obviously not that big. With his current behavior, he was I wonder if it was because he was seriously damaged while traveling through time and space. I just don't know how this thing tastes compared to eggs. Renly was thoughtful during a certain study and remembered the dream he had after returning. So the question is, will this thing be poisonous? Thinking so, Renly, who still had a chance to hatch a dragon, didn't plan to do it yet. After all, he could eat eggs or whatever he wanted. There was only one dragon egg at the moment. If he did eat it, it would be gone. Then he began to think about how to try to hatch, but before he could think about it, he suddenly heard about Stark's sister died of illness from the dining table, and was reminded of another thing. We must obtain the support of the Lannister family, otherwise your throne will not be secure at all. On the right side of the long straight table in the dining room of Maegor's mansion, an old man with dull blonde hair and a hooked nose, a thin bald head and a thin face, was cutting a piece of bacon roll with a dagger while speaking to the sturdy young man with black hair across the table. It was just that after his voice fell for a long time, the black-haired young man with a heroic face did not answer any words. Instead, he kept silently chewing the dry crispy bread in his hand. Seeing this, the old man named Jonaran couldn't help but said, "I'm sorry about Lina, Robert, but now I have to remind you." "Spare me, John, I don't want you to remind me of anything." The other party muttered impatiently, his voice sounding muffled due to the food he was chewing in his mouth. "Just let me have breakfast in peace." Cersei, Lord Tywin's virgin daughter, is only 17 years old. She is impeccably beautiful and is known as the Light of the West. She is also gentle, virtuous, and proficient. Old John was talking to himself and didn't notice the other person's flushed face. So before he finished speaking, the black-haired young man suddenly banged the table with a bang. The silver plate collided and the food splashed, scaring the two servants behind him. I couldn't help but shiver. "I told you there's no need. Let that bitch daughter of Tywin go to hell." He cursed angrily, but then he seemed to feel that he was overreacting, so he restrained his anger slightly. "Why don't you ask Stannis if he is interested? He is my heir and is qualified to arrange a marriage for me. I'm engaged." Stannis, who had just returned to the Red Keep in the past 2 days, was eating breakfast silently. Hearing this, he gave his brother a cold look. "The Florent family of the Reach, my father made the decision himself before he left." This guy's tone was firm, and he obviously didn't intend to leave any room for negotiation. Robert glanced at his second brother displeasedly when he heard this, but said nothing. Instead, he turned to look at the end of the dining table, where he was eating breakfast quietly. There was nothing there at all. Sensual little guy. Then let's take Renly. Look at his handsome appearance. He looks exactly like me when I was a kid. This is so ridiculous. The old man said helplessly after hearing this. "Robert, how old is Renly, you?" "7 hells, John, how about you marry that Cersei?" Robert interrupted impatiently, ignoring his adoptive father's darkened face. "This might give you 2 more heirs. Do you need me to remind you?" "Robert, I already have Lady Lisa." The old man said angrily, "I also believe that the issue about my heir will be resolved sooner or later. I don't think you need to worry about it yet." "Then don't worry about my marriage. The king's marriage is very important to the whole country. But I'm not the king yet." This obvious sophistry made the hook-nosed old man laugh angrily. He immediately put down the cutlery in his hands and lowered his voice to the black-haired young man opposite. "Lina is dead, Robert. How can I tell you to understand? She is already dead. Died." These words made Robert, who was normally normal, suddenly darken his face. He glared at the old man opposite him with his blue eyes for a long time, and finally squeezed out a sentence through gritted teeth. "John, fuck you, I fucking know Lina is dead." "Then you should." The old man was interrupted by the other party in an irritable tone before he could finish his words. "But I said I won't marry anyone but her. I said it many times. So don't mention that Lannister bitch to me again." "That's right, don't mention a word about it. I don't want to hear it. You have to listen, unless you don't want to sit on the Iron Throne and don't want to." "Fuck the Iron Throne." Robert stood up abruptly to interrupt, pointing at the old man with red eyes and yelling, "I've had enough, John, fuck Lannister. Marry yourself. Go get married." He cursed as he kicked the stool and left the table. "I just wanted Lina, but what happened? What I got back in exchange for it was that ugly, hard, broken chair." The cursing words gradually faded away, leaving the hook-nosed old man sitting there with a gloomy look on his face for a while, and finally sighed sadly. Stannis on the table looked at his brothers retreating back with an expressionless face. The silver dagger in his hand was subconsciously cutting a piece of cheese, but he accidentally cut it on the finger of his other hand. Looking down, he slightly frowned. After glancing at the only 2 people left on the table, Renly suddenly said, "I'm full." After saying this, without waiting for a response, he slid off the bench and left in a hurry. He looked like he was frightened. However, Renly was actually considering taking advantage of this to solve something. With that peculiar golden finger and a well-fed background, he may soon have a status that far exceeds that of most people. Renly has many plans for his future, but he should also plan ahead. For example, find a way to solve the cuckold problem. He had thought about this issue when he was at Storm's End. He didn't think much about it, but it was not nothing. Looking at Robert's appearance today, it was obvious that he was very resistant to his future wife. So what Renly should consider now is, how to give the other party an excuse to refuse. As for whether this excuse can really be effective, it must be created first. Chapter 58. As Stannis's entourage, the former smuggler Davos was not placed in the core area of the Red Castle, but he was not excluded. Instead, he lived with other knights and guards of the Baratheon family in a military camp outside the castle near the city wall. Now as a knight, his status is no longer what it used to be. At the same time, relying on his senior knowledge of ships, he is still highly regarded by Stannis at this time, because the other party is forming a fleet to attack Dragonstone. It is worth mentioning that after becoming a knight, the emblem he chose for himself was a small black boat printed on a grey background. The sail of the small black boat was inlaid with an onion pattern and two half-pinched fingers, which looked like it was reaching down from above to pick the onion, and it seemed that it had just been placed on the boat. When he was found, he was talking to a stable boy in the stable. Renly waved at him from a distance, and he walked over quickly. "Good morning, Master Renly." He bowed and greeted him. His attitude was much more respectful than others. "What do you want to talk to me about?" The black-haired boy nodded, but his eyes were looking at the two Baratheon soldiers behind him. "Will, Edith, stay away, I want to tell our Onion Knight a secret." He deliberately spoke with the seriousness and earnestness unique to children, which made the two soldiers laugh. "I'm really curious about Master Renly's secret. Can we listen?" "No." The boy shook his head. The two soldiers looked at each other, pretended to sigh, and stepped back a distance. "Further away," Renly ordered. So the soldiers were relieved to move away. Although two of their colleagues had just lost the young master not long ago and were punished, they had already believed Renly's words about the secret passage, so they were not alert. At the same time, they all came from Storm's End, and they were veteran soldiers who had followed the Baratheon family for a long time. They were familiar with Davos, who solved the food problem of Storm's End, so they could stay away without worry. However, as the person involved, Davos did not feel honored. Instead, he became serious. Others did not know, but he knew that the man in front of him was definitely not a simple child. His current behavior obviously had a purpose. "My lord, what happened?" He could not help asking. "I remember you said that you were born in Flea Bottom." Renly looked up at him and asked as if to confirm, "Flea Bottom in King's Landing?" Davos nodded. "Then you should know some locals here? Prostitutes, barbers, tavern owners, canteen managers, and even rogues and villains." "I know all of them, my lord." "Then I need you to help me do something, Davos," Renly said seriously, and his expression was completely different from just now. Seeing this, the brown-haired middle-aged man in a black cloth robe half knelt on the ground and listened attentively. Then the other party began to whisper, but the more he listened, the bigger his eyes widened, and he finally couldn't help interrupting the boy's words. "Do you have evidence, sir?" "I have evidence, but I can't give it to you." Excuse me, sir, slandering nobles is a serious crime, especially a great noble like Lannister, not to mention the siblings you mentioned. Isn't it a greater crime to massacre and plunder King's Landing? Lannister is in the name of your brother. That's why I told Baratheon to stay away from them. Why should we take the initiative to taste a mouthful of stinky shit?" Renly said with disgust, "or rotten shit that has been fermenting for a long time. But such slander is not the way of decent people, sir, I'm sorry, This is true." Renly assured him solemnly, "I swear to the seven gods that this is not slander. If there is any lie, I will die miserably." Davos obviously didn't know that Renly didn't believe in God at all, and he didn't know that this man had died miserably several times. Hearing this, he opened his mouth and said hesitantly, "Maybe we should let Lord Stannis or Lord Robert know about this. They won't believe it." Renly shook his head. "They will ask, what is the source of the news? How did you know? I can't say that I saw it with magic, right?" Davos frowned when he heard this. After several contacts, he could feel that Renly had good intentions, so he didn't reject him, but he didn't believe in the magic he said, or he was full of resistance to this kind of witchcraft that he didn't understand at all. But considering that he was awarded the status of knight in a territory because of this kind of witchcraft in the beginning, the former smuggler hesitated again, not knowing whether he should agree. "I won't force you." Renly sighed at this. "I ask for your help in the name of the Baratheon family, Davos, help us, not myself. It's hard to say how sincere these words are, but they are more effective than any coercion. After the words fell, the former smuggler who was knighted by Stannis himself pinched the small bag on his chest unconsciously, hesitated for a moment, and finally thought of the traces of cruel looting in King's Landing, so he gritted his teeth and made up his mind. I can find a few reliable friends to spread this matter, my lord, but I can't guarantee how much effect it will have. I mean, it is very likely that doing so will only be useless. Just do your best. If it doesn't work, I will think of other ways. Renly shrugged, but there is a saying in Westeros that words are like the wind. I believe that the wind will eventually spread. When he said this, he unconsciously flashed back to the hostile eyes he saw when he first entered the city. The war had just ended not long ago. If the civilians in King's Landing were hostile to the Baratheon family, then what about the Lannisters who personally went out to burn, kill, and plunder? He didn't say this, but he thought Davos would think of taking advantage of this, but their topic about this ended here, because a person came not far away. The man was broad-shouldered and strong, wearing a tight grey woolen top and a black leather coat that made his body tight like a two-handed sword, and his thin cheeks and trivial black short hair were like the sharp tip of the sword. Lord Stannis. Davos stood up hurriedly after seeing the man, and then stepped forward to salute. You should go to work, Davos. The other party said expressionlessly, coaxing children is what the nanny needs to do. Okay, sir. Davos nodded in response, gave Renly a look secretly, turned around and walked away quickly. Stannis, who was standing there, lowered his stinky and hard stone face to the little boy in front of him. I thought you would be in Magur's tower, but you squatted in the stable and wasted time with my onion knight. His voice seemed to blame, but Renly usually ignored the words that contained certain ingredients in his mouth, and paid more attention to another message in it. You are looking for me. The black-haired boy was surprised. What for? This is a rare thing. When he was at Storm's End, he never talked to him unless it was necessary, let alone looking for him for something. This is also normal, what can I say? Although they are brothers, Renly has always regarded Stannis as a mean elder, even though the man in front of him is not yet 20 years old. Ignoring the doubt on the boy's face, the other party looked down at him and frowned. Before leaving Storm's End, Cresson asked me to take good care of you. I don't understand why a servant asked me to take care of you, but he said it was his responsibility as a brother. You can just think about it yourself, why say it out loud? Renly's face darkened when he heard this. After looking at his expression for a few times, the other party suddenly nodded, then turned and left. Robert will not be in a good mood recently. I will ask the servants to send breakfast to your room for the next few days. You must eat on time. As he said this, he seemed to remember something and his footsteps suddenly stopped. I was testing the ship at sea a while ago. He left again after he finished speaking. What does it mean? Renly felt that this person was a bit inexplicable, but then he looked at the other person's back as he left, and he came to his senses a little, so he couldn't help but squint his eyes in suspicion. Is this, the legendary Tsundere? Chapter 59. The seeds have been spread, whether they can sprout and bear fruit depends on God's will. As a 5-year-old child who can't even leave the castle, Renly can only wait for news. This method is not very good. After all, aristocratic marriage has never been based on the will and personal conditions of both parties. However, for the time being, he is prepared to take it one step at a time. Maybe his irritable brother will really swear to die when he gets angry. Another effective way to solve this matter is to kill the two parties, but the future queen is still in the west, and her brother and adulterer Jaime is in the Red Castle, but except for a few limited times, he has been staying in the White Sword Tower, the headquarters of the King's Guard, and has not come out. When Renly visited Baristan of the King's Guard, he saw him leaning against the window of the tower in a white robe, but most of the time he could not see his shadow. Of course, even if he came out, Renly didn't think he could really kill him. Apart from anything else, as the youngest King's Guard in history, the existence of Jaime Lannister is not something that anyone can deal with, unless some despicable means are used. Unfortunately, the price of a high status is to attract attention. In addition to sufficient material enjoyment, it is inevitable to attract unnecessary attention, and it is extremely difficult to do certain things. After Stannis left, Renly took 2 guards back to Magur's tower, but before he reached the place, he suddenly heard a scream and a quarrel. Why did you ask me to give it to you? Old man, are you in cahoots with this cat? A rough and fierce roar came from a garden corridor, which attracted Renly's attention. Looking closely, he found that it was the two cowardly twins of the Redwine family. They were talking to a figure blocked by a pillar at this time. Renly felt that the figure seemed familiar, so he stepped closer. "I don't care what you say, get out of the way, or I'll tell my dad." The gruff voice continued to yell, and another child's voice complained. "It scratched my face, why should we let it go?" Renly approached and glanced at them, and found that the taller of the twins was holding a black cat with its limbs tied with ropes, kicking and twisting its legs and screaming. At the same time, he also saw who was standing opposite the twins' Baristan, one of the only two remaining king's guards in the Red Castle. "The gods created us, not for us to abuse animals, children." Then the White Knight said seriously, "Let it go, if you want a toy, I can ask the servants to find it for you." "We don't want toys, we want this," the big boy said while raising his hand to gesture to the tied black cat in his hand, his ugly face full of freckles full of pride. "That's right, I don't care what you say, he scratched my brother ugly," the short boy declared. As soon as these words came out, the tall boy was immediately unhappy. "I am the older brother. We agreed before that whoever is taller is the older brother. You see, I am already much taller than you this year." "That doesn't count," the short boy said firmly, "everyone knows that I was born first, so I am the older brother, and you are the younger brother. Then you should give me your toys, because our father said that the older brother should give way to the younger brother." "No, everything belongs to the older brother. Our father also said that all the toys on Qingting Island will be mine in the future. Then I am the older brother, and you are the younger brother." As the two of them talked, they seemed to start arguing. The white-robed knight who was left aside was a little embarrassed and didn't seem to know what to do. Renly felt that this situation was stupid, so he walked up and patted the taller boy's shoulder from behind. The other party subconsciously turned around and looked at him, and then felt his hand lighten. Looking down, the cat that was originally in his hand was already in his arms. "What are you doing?" he asked stupidly, as if he still hadn't reacted. "This cat is mine now," Renly declared. "Why is it yours?" the short boy asked with a wrinkled nose. "We caught it." "Who saw that you caught it?" Renly asked back. "My servants saw it, they all saw it," the tall boy replied. Renly didn't say anything, but turned his head to look at the two guards following behind him. So one of them said, "This is what our master Renly caught, otherwise how could it be in our master's hands?" "Yes, look at my face, I got a scratch on it because I caught it," the other one said while covering his face and screaming in pain. This made the twin brothers with grapes embroidered on their chests a little dumbfounded. After touching their scratched faces for a moment, the big one whispered to the short one, "He bullied us." It goes without saying that the short boy's expression became fierce, and he stared at the other party as if he wanted to fight. As a result, after staring at the other party for a long time without seeing any results, he was the first to back off. After a snort, he pulled his brother and turned around and walked away. "Just wait and see," he shouted as he walked, "I'm going to ask my dad to beat you up." His words did not get a response from the black-haired boy, but his twin brother pulled his sleeve. "Our dad is not here," he whispered, "and we can't beat their family. What should we do?" The short man was a little embarrassed when he heard this. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "If I had known earlier, I would have called my grandmother by her name." The twins' grandmother is Olenna Redwine, also from the Redwine family, but she married into the Tyrell family of Highgarden. She is known as the Queen of Thorns. Her name is very famous among them. In the hearts of the twins, she is a more powerful figure than their father. "Grandma isn't here either," the big guy said, his eyes rolling, "but we can go find his eldest brother. We found the secret passage, but we haven't decided what credit we want. I've decided to take that cat." "No, it's too little. We want all the cats in the Red Keep." "That's a good idea." The short guy nodded in agreement, but then hesitated again. After looking at the servants following behind him, he whispered in his brother's ear, "But it was that arrogant Renly who told us about the secret passage first. This is a bit bad." "Who said that?" the big guy retorted, "Obviously we thought of it ourselves." The short guy scratched his forehead and nodded, "Yes, we thought of it ourselves." The two children looked at each other, and then ran to the throne room impatiently, ready to formally propose this request while the future king was receiving petitioners and nobles. Renly over there didn't know what these two cowards were up to. He was holding the cat in his arms and looking up at the preaching of the people in front of him. Robbing is not a good solution, kid. The White Knight Baristan said to him seriously, it's not a good habit either. But it is the fastest solution. Renly answered confidently. Because he had to find an opportunity to run to the cellar before, he had communicated with the man in front of him a lot. Although it was just a means of covering up, they became familiar with each other after a while. That being said, we should talk to them and tell them what they should and shouldn't do, so that we can solve the problem from the root. So how long have you been talking to them? Renly asked curiously, is it effective? This made the other party speechless, and then he shook his head helplessly, looking at the cat that had become very honest in Renly's arms for some reason, and he suddenly said, its name is Bale Ryan. When I first saw it, it was still a kitten, just like its master. The voice seemed a little gloomy, and Renly felt quite strange about it, but the other party did not stop talking, staring at the black cat and muttering, as if he was lost in memories. The atmosphere in the Red Keep was very depressing at that time. Everything King Ares did was becoming more and more unbearable. The little girl was our only source of joy. I remember one time when she saw that we were in a bad mood, she ran over to dance for us. It was a Dornish dance. I have never seen such a beautiful dance in my life, and I will never see it again. Are you talking about Rhaenys? Renly asked. This name is the same as someone in his memory, but in fact it is not a person, but the daughter of Prince Rhaegar of the previous dynasty and his Dornish wife. Renly has never seen her, but he has heard of her. She seems to be younger than him. Yes, Rhaenys, a very beautiful little girl. Baristan nodded, as if he thought of something. His face was painful and regretful, which made Renly unconsciously think of the strange look of this person when he first met him. However, the White Knight did not say much, but sighed and said to Renly, Gods have mercy, take good care of it, child, I beg you, if you want to keep it, then take good care of it and don't let it get hurt again. I won't hurt it. Renly said as he looked down at the black cat in his arms, which was quite notorious in the Red Castle, and said thoughtfully, but I can't guarantee that it won't hurt me. This made the gloomy Baristan couldn't help laughing, and then squatted down and patted Renly's arm. It seems to like you very much, I believe it won't do this. I hope so. Renly replied, and raised his hand to touch the cat's nose, and then heard the other side meow softly, and the pair of light blue cat eyes looked at the black-haired boy like a shy little girl. Little girl? Renly felt that he seemed to think too much. Chapter 60. The tavern was dark, with grease candles burning vaguely on every table. The wooden pillars of the tavern were tied with blazing torches, which together with the candles illuminated the greasy faces that were either sloppy or drunk. The tavern maids kept shuttling between the gaps between tables. The air was filled with the smell of meat and stench, mixed with the sounds of clamor or shouting and laughing, forming an inherent portrait of a medieval tavern. This was a very simple tavern located in the King's Landing Flea Bottom. The ground was unpaved hard mud, and the wooden ceiling above had long been blackened by the large amount of smoke rising from candles and torches. However, this was also a common place for ordinary civilians to drink and have fun. You don't need to pay me, Davos. The tavern owner was a thin, middle-aged man with a mustache. Now he was hiding in the back room of the tavern and secretly meeting a brown-haired middle-aged man wearing coarse black clothes and a black cloak. I don't care if it's true or not. The Lion family has a grudge against me and us. It's enough for you to know this. It costs a lot to hire people. You will need them eventually. The brown-haired middle-aged man standing in front of him shook his head. I can't ask you to work for nothing. Why should it cost more to ask our prostitute to gossip more? The tavern owner sneered, as for those singers, their thief ears are eager to find out the shameless deeds of all the nobles in the Seven Kingdoms. You see, Davos, although we can't beat those who ride horses and carry guns, we are not cowards who will do nothing when they are bullied. You know, I went out to buy goods that day, and my sister was raped by a lion family. If I knew which bastard did it, I would skin him alive. God bless her. The brown-haired middle-aged man sighed. It has been 5 days since the conversation with Renly that day, and during this period, in addition to his normal work, he spent all his spare time on this matter. Because of the promise to that person? Or was it because of the indignation in his heart? He couldn't figure it out. Things went more smoothly than he had imagined. Afterwards, he didn't even use half of the activity funds that Renly gave him. Now he has basically found all the reliable friends he can find in Flea Bottom. Tavern owner, canteen chef, shoemaker, barber, fishmonger, and even the down-and-out bard. Everyone agreed in unison. Everyone had a grudge against Lannister, big or small, but everyone had it. Of course, Davos also had some old friends who were not affected by the war, but he thought it was best to be cautious about this. Half a lifetime of smuggling career allowed him to see all kinds of people, and also saw many unexpected betrayals. Even those who had been contacted, he contacted them secretly and did not dare to approach them in public. After staying in this tavern and drinking a cup of brown barley wine, Davos said goodbye to his old friend and left. However, just after leaving the noise of the tavern behind, he suddenly felt as if someone was looking at him. Not long ago, a light rain made the narrow road here muddy. The windows of the 3-story wooden houses on both sides were closed, and there was no one under the stalls built on the roadside because of the night. After scanning the surroundings and finding nothing, Davos touched the long sword hanging in the black cloak with his leather-gloved hand, and then stepped out of the street. The sight projected on him seemed to have disappeared soon, but Davos did not relax his vigilance, and even quickened his pace. However, just as he was about to walk out of this narrow road, a slender figure suddenly jumped out of the shadow by the wall. Onion Knight. Davos paused when he heard the words, and the hand touching the hilt of the sword at his waist tightened unconsciously. Who are you? A friend. The other person said so, standing in the cold street with his back to the moonlight, wearing a black cloak and unable to see his face, but his voice was soft, obviously a woman. However, Davos did not let down his guard. Friends will not do this kind of stalking. Stalking? The female voice chuckled, no, we just happened to meet you here. We? The brown-haired middle-aged man's heart tightened when he heard this word, but before he could react, someone suddenly patted his shoulder from behind. If it was an enemy, you would have been killed by us long ago, Davos. The voice was rough with a hint of laughter, but the brown-haired middle-aged man couldn't help but tighten the hilt of the sword in his hand, but he did not act rashly, but slowly turned his head to look. A face that made him somewhat familiar came into his eyes. Are you Ben? He asked hesitantly. Yes, it's me, Big Belly Ben. The other party nodded, wearing coarse cloth, and his fat body, with a big round face that was particularly prominent in the moonlight. I'm not very satisfied with this nickname. I should be called Strong Ben. As far as I know, you are already dead? No, 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 Arthur Dayne bribed those bastards, but not all of them betrayed us. Davos understood. The man in front of him was a gang member of an organization called the Royal Forest Brotherhood. Of course, that was in the past. When he came out of Storm's End, he had told the black-haired boy about this. The gang was entrenched in the royal forest where the king hunted, and made a living by kidnapping and extorting nobles. 2 years ago, the Mad King sent troops to wipe it out. It is said that Sir Arthur Dayne, the leader of the Dawn Sword, was able to completely annihilate this group of bandits because he bribed the villagers living in the royal forest. However, at present, it is obviously wrong to say that it is complete. The man in front of him named Ben was one of the more famous gangster leaders in the Kingswood Brotherhood. He was said to be dead, but he was clearly alive and well at this time. That little boy who sold himself? Davos asked. He knew the person in front of him mainly because he had contact with him when he was a smuggler, but the two of them had only met once or twice, so they could not be called familiar. But now, it seems that they are specifically looking for me. Davos couldn't think of any reason for these people to come to him other than the child he met not long ago. His name is Tob. The soft-voiced woman in front of him said, he is my son. We are short of money. That day he heard that a noble convoy was passing by and ran over. Are you Wenda the White Deer? Davos asked again. Wenda the White Deer is also a leader in the Kingswood Brotherhood. Davos has never seen her, but he can guess it. Now Jenny, blonde Jenny. Big Belly said, the name Baela Wenda is much louder than ours. Hey, who calls her a woman? Women are born to give birth to children, everyone says so. They didn't seem to be hostile, but Davos would not let down his guard because of this. The things he did during this trip required concealment, and now being approached by these two former bandits, he didn't think it was a good thing. What do your two friends want from me? He said slowly, secretly thinking about how to get out. Of course I have something to do. Why don't we go to a nearby pub to sit down and talk? Excuse me, friends, I have to go to work later. Don't be nervous, my friend, we just want to ask you for a favor, a small favor. The big fat man named Ben said, you see, although we are, well, dead, in fact we are not at all not dead, so, as long as this person is not dead, he must have many needs, such as... He seemed to be a bit speechless, so before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by his companion. We would like to ask you to help introduce the noble young master of the Lu family. Nothing more, it's that simple. What do you want to see him for? Davos frowned upon hearing this. As an attendant? As a private soldier? That's what it is anyway. We have seen many servants of noble gentlemen, and servants of noble children are not uncommon. Big Belly said, those trash can't compare to any of us. You mean, you are going to take refuge with a little boy? Although he knew that the little boy was not simple, Davos felt that it sounded so absurd. Have you seen him? If you haven't, you should have heard of him. He is only 5 years old. The pot-bellied Ben was stunned when he heard this. 5 years old? We heard it was 6 years old. But that's not important. He will always grow up, yes, he will grow up. We are still young, and we have long stopped being bandits. Now, as long as he comes over with 2 golden dragons, like that day, we can do anything for him, yes, anything, no matter how old he is. The former smuggler was stunned when he heard this. The 2 men in front of him were treating Renly as a fat sheep. Why not join Lord Stannis? He tried to remind the other party, the boy you want to see does not have the right to recruit private soldiers. At the same time, his money was given by his family's butler, so he cannot spend it casually. This is not poaching, but it is really impossible. It seems that the young master of the Baratheon family has no one to control him, but in fact the selection of the people around him is very strict. Whether they are servants or guards, they are all carefully selected, and the 3 generations up to him have to be taken into consideration. You can let people sneak in at will. And Davos didn't have much trust in them, but the 2 of them didn't seem to give up easily, so they thought about asking them to change their targets, or they wanted them to give up the idea after hitting their heads. However, after saying this, the 2 of them just shook their heads. Actually, we wanted to join Stannis in the first place because he accepted you and a smuggler, but... The woman named Jenny looked at the brown-haired middle-aged man with soft eyes. Does your finger still hurt? Davos. These words made the client subconsciously raise his hand to touch the small bag hanging on his chest, and Ben, who also walked up to him with a big belly, said, we can't imagine why you let him chop off his fingers, and we can't imagine either. Why did he have to chop off your fingers? Good deeds cannot offset evil deeds, and evil deeds cannot cover up good deeds. Since I have been engaged in smuggling for more than 10 years, I must pay the price. Davos heard this and said seriously, Lord Stannis's punishment for me very just, there is probably no more just person in the world. It sounds good. Being fair is better than not treating us as human beings, but we don't have noble sentiments like you. If you ask me to cut off my fingers, I won't do it. Big-bellied Ben said in amusement, besides, if someone who does our kind of business really goes to seek refuge, he might chop off his head instead of his fingers. Can a brainless person still do things for the lords? The woman also chuckled, obviously not intending to give up. Davos frowned when he heard this, but it shouldn't be a little boy. Don't you think this idea is ridiculous? Well, of course it makes sense. Big-bellied Ben said, Robert of the Deer family is very generous. We have met him. I heard that he is going to be the king. Maybe he will not be stingy with his only 2 brothers. Maybe the little boy you mentioned will become a lord in a while. Boys becoming lords is very common, and we rarely make mistakes. Of course, this is a gamble, but even if it is not the case, I see that the child is so generous. Ahem, anyway, we will not lie to you. We have seen many nobles, but this is the first time we have seen a noble as generous as that child. To be honest, we are all scared. Apart from anything else, a few gold dragons are enough to spend for several years, which is more than what we can earn by raising pigs in the forest. How about it, friend? You are now famous, and you can take care of us poor people. Do you really think that child is easy to fool? Can you easily fool gold coins? Davos shook his head secretly when he heard this, but he could actually understand some of the 2 people's thoughts. There are many knights who can't find a master to adopt them in the 7 kingdoms and are so poor that they have to sleep in the wilderness, not to mention these former bandits. They are neither knights nor clean people. It is not easy to find a backer, and it is difficult for them to focus on a little boy. I can tell him about this. After thinking about it, he said, but I'm not sure if he wants you, and I won't hide your identity for you. The two looked at each other and nodded. Of course, if he minds our identity, then forget it, but please say a good word for us, friends. We have been clean for several years and have decided to be decent people. Big-bellied Ben spoke with a serious face. Seeing Davos nod, he said again, but before that, I think we should be able to help you. Say bad things about the lion family. I'm good at this. Just treat it as a reward for you. Davos was stunned by this, and then he said vigilantly, you all know. You are very careful. The other party laughed when he heard it. But we have been observing you for a long time.